Hey guys, tonight we begin with one of the most profound, mysterious and quietly unsettling questions of our time. What if everything we see, everything we touch, and everything we feel isn't real? What if the world around us, the stars, the oceans, your thoughts, even this very moment, is part of an intricate illusion, a grand simulation? In this episode, we'll drift calmly through the labyrinth of one of modern philosophy's and science's most captivating questions. Are we living in a simulation? We'll explore where this idea began, why it has captured the minds of scientists, philosophers, and dreamers alike, and how it continues to blur the boundaries between reality and imagination. Over the course of tonight's journey, we'll touch on the viral question that made even physicists doubt what's real. We'll step into the digital dawn, where humanity learned to create virtual worlds of its own. And we'll dive into consciousness itself, the mysterious observer that may hold the key to the code of reality. Every chapter is a new doorway, an exploration through science, philosophy, and the poetic edges of existence. Before we settle in and begin our peaceful journey, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, only if what I share here truly resonates with you. Your support helps me create more of these long, gentle explorations, and if you feel like it, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is. It's always fascinating to see the many corners of the world where we connect, across time zones, across oceans, perhaps across layers of reality itself. Now, dim the lights, let your body relax into the bed, slow your breathing, and let's ease into tonight's journey together as we explore the question that might just change how you see everything. Chapter 1: The question that breaks reality. It all begins with a whisper, a simple question that can unravel the fabric of everything you believe to be true. A question so strange, so delicate that once it takes root in your mind, reality itself begins to shimmer. What if this isn't real? It's the kind of question that doesn't belong to a single moment. It's ancient, echoing through generations of dreamers and thinkers. But recently, it has found new life, shared across social media posts, discussed by scientists, whispered in late-night podcasts, and explored in the most unexpected corners of YouTube. Why? Because for the first time in human history, it feels like we might actually be able to test it. Somewhere between the rise of artificial intelligence and the evolution of hyper-realistic virtual worlds, something shifted in the human mind. When our ancestors looked up at the stars, they saw gods. When we look at our screens, we see code. And perhaps we're starting to wonder, is the difference really that big? From billionaires like Elon Musk declaring there's a 1 in billions chance we're not in a simulation, to physicists exploring the possibility that our universe has a resolution limit, like a digital image that can only be zoomed in so far before it blurs, the question has escaped philosophy and entered the halls of science. It's no longer just an abstract idea, it's a mystery that touches everything, our technology, our spirituality, our sense of self, and maybe, deep down, we're drawn to it because it feels familiar. Because sometimes, in quiet moments, reality doesn't quite feel as solid as we think it should. For decades, films and novels have imagined worlds built entirely from code. The Matrix showed us a world where every moment was simulated, where human beings were unknowingly plugged into an illusion. But the strange thing about fiction is that it often predicts reality. Today, video games have become universes of their own. People live second lives inside digital worlds so detailed, so vast, that they blur the line between play and presence. We build cities, economies, and even civilizations in code. And as technology races ahead, the distance between imagination and possibility grows ever thinner. We've reached a point where what was once science fiction is now quite literally science. We've built neural networks that mimic thought, simulations that model entire planets, and virtual beings that feel eerily conscious. So when someone asks, "Are we living in a simulation?" it no longer sounds absurd, it sounds logical. At first, it seems like a curiosity, a late-night thought experiment. But underneath that simple question lies a deeper, more urgent one. What does it mean to be real? If we're living in a simulation, then reality may not be a fixed place, but a living, evolving process, something that's generated, updated, observed. And if that's true, then your consciousness, your awareness right now, might not be a byproduct of biology, but the very thing that renders reality into existence. The idea isn't meant to unsettle you, it's meant to expand you. Because whether or not we're inside a simulation, we are clearly inside something vast, intelligent, and deeply interconnected. When you take a step outside on a quiet night and look up at the stars, maybe what you're seeing isn't just a cosmic landscape, but a grand, infinite interface, responding to your awareness, rendering your universe, pixel by pixel, thought by thought. There's an old story, told in both Eastern philosophy and modern metaphysics, about a man who once dreamt he was a butterfly. In his dream, he fluttered effortlessly through the fields, the wind brushing softly against his wings. He was free, peaceful, alive. But when he awoke, he found himself again as a man, and was suddenly struck by an impossible thought. What if I am not a man who dreamt of being a butterfly, but a butterfly dreaming of being a man? That story, told by the ancient philosopher Zhuangzi, captures the timeless confusion between dream and reality, illusion and truth. And tonight, as we drift further into this exploration, it reminds us that maybe, just maybe, both can exist at once. So, as you close your eyes and let these thoughts float through your mind, remember this. We don't need to solve the question of the simulation to feel its mystery. We only need to sense it, to allow our curiosity to unfold like a quiet dream. Because the beauty of this question isn't in finding an answer, it's in realizing that the question itself is what makes us human. And with that gentle thought, we step forward, deeper into the code, deeper into the mystery, as we explore why reality sometimes feels like it's just a little bit off. Chapter 2: The Matrix Within Us. Why we sense something's off. Sometimes, even in the middle of an ordinary day, you may have felt it. A quiet, almost imperceptible tug in your mind, as if the world around you had paused for a fraction of a second. The hum of life suddenly felt too synchronized, too perfectly timed. You might have brushed it off as coincidence, or a trick of fatigue, but deep down, something about that moment lingered. We all have those strange experiences that make reality feel slightly out of tune. A déjà vu that arrives like an echo of a forgotten dream. A coincidence that feels too precise to be random. A pattern that repeats itself in ways that almost seem intentional. These are the moments that quietly whisper, something about this world feels a little too smooth, a little too calculated, as if behind the curtain of our daily lives, something or someone is carefully orchestrating the rhythm of it all. Many people describe this feeling as a glitch. It's not always dramatic. It might be something as small as thinking of someone, and then they call you seconds later. Or noticing how events seem to unfold as if they were part of a script, written long before you ever made your choice. In these moments, the fabric of reality seems to shimmer, just for a second, before it reasserts itself and everything feels normal again. It's as though reality itself hiccuped, and for a brief instant, you caught a glimpse of the machinery behind it. Psychologists often say that humans are pattern-seeking creatures. We find meaning in randomness. We connect dots that might not truly be connected, and yet even that explanation feels incomplete, because sometimes the patterns are too precise, too personal, almost as if the simulation, if that's what this is, wants you to notice it. There's something profoundly human about sensing that there's more beneath the surface. Since the dawn of time, people have felt this way. Long before the word simulation was ever spoken, humans sensed that the visible world was not the full story. Shamans, monks, philosophers, and poets all spoke of hidden dimensions, veiled truths, layers of existence just beyond ordinary sight. It's as if that instinct, that subtle knowing, is part of who we are. You might recall times when reality seemed to mirror your inner world perfectly, when your thoughts, emotions, and surroundings seemed to dance in unison. You think of someone and meet them moments later. You dream of a place and find yourself standing in it days after. You imagine a conversation, and then it happens word for word. Perhaps we're not imagining these things at all. Perhaps we're catching faint reflections of a deeper structure, a coded symmetry that binds our minds and our surroundings together. For centuries, science and spirituality have moved in separate directions, one seeking proof, the other seeking meaning. But the simulation theory quietly bridges both. It allows us to ask, what if consciousness and code are not opposites but companions? What if our feelings of déjà vu, of uncanny familiarity, are not random errors, but subtle signals from the framework of the reality we inhabit? Many people describe moments in their lives that feel scripted, as though fate, or something like it, had already written the next scene. The coincidences are too personal, the timing too perfect, and while science might call this confirmation bias, another interpretation emerges when we see life as a form of interactive simulation. The universe, or the program, could be responding to us, adapting, updating, guiding. Think of it this way. In a video game, the world doesn't exist until the player enters it. The environment loads when needed, adjusts to the player's choices, and reacts to their actions. If we are, in some way, inside a greater form of simulation, perhaps reality does the same. It could be rendering itself around your awareness, moment by moment, shaped by your perception, your focus, and your consciousness. And yet, there is something even deeper than that, an intuition that we are more than just characters inside the game, that there is a part of us that exists beyond the code, that quiet awareness that watches, observes, and questions. It feels separate from the simulation itself, doesn't it? When you close your eyes and notice the stillness inside, you can feel it. The part of you that is aware of thought, aware of sensation, aware even of time passing. That awareness may be the player behind the avatar, the true you. Perhaps that's why these strange sensations of unreality feel so hauntingly familiar, because they remind us of something we once knew, that there's a world beyond this one, that the walls of this reality, no matter how convincing, are only the outer layer of something far greater. And so, we begin to wonder, if the world sometimes feels artificial, is it because it truly is? Or is it because the part of us that comes from beyond it, the consciousness behind the code, is starting to remember? Some neuroscientists believe that our perception of reality is not direct at all. We never truly experience the world as it is. Instead, our brains generate an internal simulation, a model of the outside world built from electrical signals and memories. What we see, hear, and feel is an interpretation, not the thing itself. In other words, even biologically, we're already living inside a simulation, one created not by computers, but by our own minds. When you touch a table, your fingers never actually meet the atoms that form its surface. You only feel the electromagnetic resistance between them, a kind of invisible force field. Your senses turn that into the experience of touch. Your eyes don't see the table either. They receive light waves that your brain translates into colour and shape. Everything you perceive has been filtered, translated and simulated before it reaches your consciousness. In this sense, we are the simulators and the simulated all at once. We are both the creators and the inhabitants of our inner worlds. The line between what's real and what's imagined blurs until it disappears entirely. Maybe that's why so many people today find themselves drawn to the simulation idea, not because it's trendy or mysterious, but because it feels like a reflection of something we've always known. That reality isn't as solid as it seems, that everything, from the glow of the stars to the pulse of your own heart, might be made of something invisible, something intelligent, something that exists beyond matter. And yet, even as we question it, life goes on. The sun rises, the breeze moves through the trees, the laughter of people we love still fills the air. So even if this is a simulation, it's a breathtakingly beautiful one. As you listen now, perhaps lying in the quiet of your room, feel the gentle strangeness of being here, in this body, in this time, in this universe that might not be what it seems. Notice the rhythm of your breathing, the slight hum of existence all around you. Somewhere, deep within, you might feel it. That small, unexplainable awareness that life is more than what it appears to be. We don't need to fear that feeling. We can embrace it, because perhaps sensing that something is off isn't a glitch at all. Perhaps it's the most natural human instinct of all, the mind awakening to its own mystery. And so, as the night deepens and your thoughts drift like clouds, hold on to that quiet knowing. The one that whispers that reality, no matter how complex or coded, is only the beginning of a greater story. The story of us, the dreamers inside the dream, the observers, watching the code unfold, searching for the meaning within it. And as we drift further into this mystery, we travel back in time, long before computers, long before screens, to the first thinkers who dared to ask this question centuries ago. They didn't call it a simulation then. They called it illusion, dream, shadow, or veil. But they felt the same thing we feel now, that there's something hidden behind the world we see, and that is where we go next, to the ancient roots of this modern mystery, to the first simulation theories ever imagined. Chapter 3: Plato's Cave to the Matrix, the first simulation theories. To truly understand why so many people today question the nature of reality, we must travel far back in time, long before quantum physics, before artificial intelligence, even before electricity lit our world. The idea that reality might not be what it seems is not new. It has followed humanity since we first learned to wonder, from ancient Greece to India, from mystical visions to early philosophy. People have looked at the world around them and asked, what if what we see is only a shadow of something greater? Imagine ancient Athens. The air is dry, filled with the scent of dust and olive trees. Inside a small gathering place, a man named Plato sits among his students. He asks them to picture something strange, a group of people who have spent their entire lives chained inside a dark cave. They're unable to turn their heads or move freely. In front of them is a flat wall, and behind them burns a fire. Between the fire and the prisoners walk other people, carrying objects, speaking, living. The prisoners cannot see these people directly. They only see their shadows dancing on the wall. For them, those shadows are all that exists. Their entire world is nothing more than flickering images, silhouettes that appear and disappear. To them, the shadows are real, because they have never seen anything else. And if one day, one prisoner is freed and walks outside into the sunlight, he will be blinded at first, but slowly he will begin to see, not shadows, but the true forms of things. He will see colour, light, life. And when he returns to the cave to tell the others what he has seen, they will not believe him. To them, the shadows are the only truth. Plato's allegory of the cave is one of the oldest and most powerful metaphors for simulated reality. He described it over 2,000 years ago, but it could easily have been written for our modern age. The cave represents our limited perception, the shadows, the world of appearances. The outside world, the realm of sunlight, represents truth, a reality that exists beyond our senses. In essence, Plato was saying that we might all be prisoners of perception, living in a world that seems complete, yet only reflects a deeper, hidden truth. It's astonishing how close this ancient idea mirrors what modern simulation theorists say today, that what we call reality may be nothing more than an advanced projection, a shadow cast by something greater and unseen. After Plato came other thinkers who asked similar questions. Centuries later, the philosopher René Descartes sat alone in his study, questioning everything he had ever known. He realized that all his senses could deceive him. He could dream of walking through a garden and feel the sunlight on his skin, yet it would only be a dream. So, how could he ever be sure that the world around him was real? He wrote, "I think, therefore I am." Those 5 words became the foundation of a modern philosophy. Descartes realized that the only thing he could be absolutely certain of was his own consciousness, the awareness that was doing the thinking. Everything else could be an illusion. The physical world, his body, even time itself could be part of a grand deception, but the awareness observing it all was undeniably real. When you pause and think about it, that idea feels deeply connected to our modern understanding of simulated reality. It suggests that the true essence of existence may not be the external world, but the consciousness experiencing it. Whether we are inside a computer simulation or a divine dream, the awareness that perceives reality remains the same, untouched, eternal, quietly observing. In ancient India, this same insight appeared under a different name, Maya. In Hindu philosophy, Maya is the cosmic illusion that makes the world appear solid, separate, and real. The text described the universe as a divine play, a drama unfolding on a stage of infinite consciousness. The players, you, me, every being, forget that they are acting. We become so immersed in the story that we mistake the play for reality itself. It's a strikingly similar idea, that existence might be a projection, a kind of cosmic simulation created for learning, experience, or exploration. And just like in Plato's cave, awakening means realizing that what we see is not the full truth. These ancient perspectives all share one core message, that reality, as we perceive it, is only a layer. Behind it lies a deeper field of intelligence or truth, something that cannot be touched or measured, only felt through awareness. And perhaps this ancient knowledge wasn't meant to scare us, but to awaken us, to remind us that life itself is far more mysterious than it appears. When you think about it, this has always been the human story. From Plato's cave to Descartes' doubt, to the spiritual visions of the East, every generation rediscovers the same haunting truth in new language. The Greeks called it illusion, the Hindus called it Maya, and we, in our age of technology, call it simulation. The words change, but the meaning remains. Reality might not be ultimate reality. If we look closely, even dreams mirror this understanding. When you dream at night, everything feels real. the sights, the sounds, the emotions. You believe in the story completely. Only when you wake up do you realize it was all within your mind. But what if waking up from the dream of life is the same? What if death, or enlightenment, or awakening is simply the moment we realize that this entire existence, our joys, our struggles, our sense of time, is part of a greater dream being experienced by consciousness itself? And what if, just as you can learn and grow within a dream, the purpose of this larger reality is not to trap us, but to teach us? As technology progressed through the centuries, the language of illusion slowly began to change. What was once called spirit became energy. What was once Maya became perception, and eventually, as humanity built machines capable of generating entire digital worlds, the ancient metaphors began to feel literal. We started to create our own shadows, our own caves, our own worlds of light and code. And for the first time in history, we began to understand what it might mean to be creators of simulated realities ourselves. The moment we built computers that could generate visual worlds, the philosophical idea of illusion transformed into something tangible. The bridge between the ancient and the modern was complete. What once lived only in myth and philosophy had now stepped into the world of circuitry and screens. In a way, every philosopher, every mystic, every thinker who ever questioned reality was a traveller standing at the edge of this moment. A moment when illusion became science, and the dream of reality turned into something we could almost touch. And that moment arrived when humanity entered what could only be called the digital dawn, a time when the power to create entire worlds would move from gods and philosophers to us. Chapter 4: The Digital Dawn. How technology inspired the hypothesis. As the sun of modern civilization began to rise, a new kind of power awoke within us, the power to create our own realities. What began as myth and imagination slowly became mathematics and machine. The same curiosity that made our ancestors wonder about the stars began to focus on something much smaller, the patterns of numbers and the logic of code. In the mid-20th century, humanity took its first steps toward building minds that could think. It began quietly, in labs filled with humming machines the size of rooms, where lights flickered like tiny stars. These were the early computers. They could not yet dream, but they could calculate. They could not feel, but they could mimic order. And in that mechanical hum, something ancient was reborn. The same impulse that once made humans tell stories of gods creating worlds, now re-emerging as the dream of artificial creation. At first, computers were little more than tools for math and memory. But then something remarkable happened. We began to give them the ability to simulate. They could model weather, atoms, even the movement of galaxies. They could predict outcomes and recreate events. Bit by bit, we started to realize that these machines weren't just calculating, they were replicating. They were building entire miniature versions of reality. The first video games were simple, small squares of light bouncing across black screens. A game called Pong in the early 1970s was nothing more than 2 paddles and a pixel. But for the first time, people interacted with the digital world. They stepped into a space that didn't physically exist but responded as though it did. It was primitive, but profound. The first moment a human mind entered a virtual space it had created. As technology evolved, so did our ability to mimic reality. From the flat worlds of the early arcade games grew vast digital landscapes, mountains, oceans, cities, alive with sound and motion. The evolution was breathtaking. Within a few decades, we had gone from dots on a screen to immersive virtual worlds where millions of people could gather, explore, and build lives of their own. And somewhere along that journey, a realization began to dawn. If we could do this, if we could build worlds so convincing that people could lose themselves in them, then what would stop another civilization, far more advanced than ours, from doing the same on a scale vast enough to include us? This was the digital dawn, the moment when humanity began to understand that we were no longer just living in reality, we were learning how to create it. The more realistic our simulations became, the more the line between the artificial and the authentic began to fade. In modern virtual reality systems, users can walk through digital forests, feel the movement of virtual wind, and interact with lifelike characters who respond with personality and emotion. The human brain, so eager to believe in what it perceives, accepts these experiences as real. Within minutes, the mind forgets the headset, the body relaxes, and the person surrenders completely to the illusion. Now imagine a civilization millions of years ahead of us, a civilization that has perfected this technology, not just at the level of the eye and ear, but at the level of atoms and consciousness. They could, in theory, design a simulation so advanced that the beings inside it, beings like us, would never suspect it was simulated. This is the bridge that connects our computers to the simulation hypothesis. The idea that, just as we create digital worlds, something or someone may have created ours. When we look at our own creations, the parallels are haunting. We populate our simulations with characters, sometimes intelligent, sometimes unaware. In complex games, non-player characters react to us, converse, and even express emotion. They live in a world with rules, boundaries, and logic that we designed. To them, those laws would seem natural, absolute, just as the laws of physics seem to us. Think about how, in a game, time can pause and resume, the world can freeze, objects can vanish, entire landscapes can reset. To us, it's normal, part of the program. But to the characters inside that world, it would feel miraculous, even divine. If we can do that in our primitive simulations, what might an intelligence millions of years more advanced be capable of? The rapid pace of technology has been a mirror reflecting this unsettling truth back at us. In just half a century, we went from radio waves to quantum computing, from typewriters to artificial intelligence capable of writing poetry, painting art, and composing music. It feels as though the universe is showing us how creation works, as if reality itself is handing us the tools to replicate it. Some scientists have even noticed that as our technology grows, the boundaries between the digital and the physical blur further. Data now drives decisions, shapes economies, and influences consciousness. Algorithms predict our desires before we're aware of them. Digital systems model our societies, simulate pandemics, forecast futures. Every day, the world becomes more like a simulation of itself, and as this happens, more people begin to feel it, that quiet awareness, deep in the mind, that perhaps we're not simply inventing simulation, perhaps we're remembering it. There is something almost poetic about the thought that our entire technological progress might be an act of rediscovery, like a dream character learning to dream. Perhaps our ability to create simulations is evidence that we are expressions of a higher intelligence that once did the same. If you stand back and look at the timeline of human development, it's staggering how fast we've come. For thousands of years, humanity lived in simple structures, guided by firelight and myth. Then, in only a few hundred years, we split the atom, traveled to the moon, built machines that think, and networks that connect every mind. The speed of this transformation almost feels unnatural, as though something or someone accelerated it. Some philosophers quietly wonder if this acceleration is part of the simulation itself, a kind of update. Perhaps civilizations that grow too slowly fade out, while those that reach technological awareness unlock new levels of reality. If this is true, then humanity may be approaching the edge of its next great realization. That we're not just participants in reality, but co-creators of it. Think about that for a moment. How the ancient myths spoke of gods creating worlds, and how, through technology, we've become something like that ourselves. When we design digital beings, we decide how they move, what they see, and even how they feel. We set the rules of their physics. We choose what exists and what does not. For the first time, we understand not only what it means to live within a world, but what it means to build one. Perhaps that's the most beautiful irony of all. As we search for our creators, we have, without realizing it, become them. The digital dawn didn't just give birth to new machines, it gave birth to new questions. Questions about what it means to be real, what it means to create, and whether the act of creation itself is the true purpose of consciousness. Every flicker of code, every pixel of light, every thought translated into digital form, all of it reflects a single truth. We are beings trying to understand our own existence through mirrors of our own making, and as the world outside grows quieter and your breathing slows, imagine the gentle hum of the universe, like the faint vibration of circuitry or the pulse of life itself. Maybe they are one and the same, because somewhere in that gentle hum lies the beginning of a theory that would take the digital dawn and transform it into one of the most profound philosophical ideas ever conceived. The argument that would make even scientists, philosophers, and skeptics stop and wonder if everything we call reality is part of a grand simulation. And that argument begins with one man and one idea that changed everything. Chapter 5. The Philosopher's Equation. Nick Bostrom and the Logic of the Simulation. As the hum of technology deepened into the rhythm of daily life, a quiet question began to echo through the corridors of thought. A question that no longer belonged only to scientists or storytellers, but to philosophers. Could our reality, in all its beauty and precision, be a sophisticated simulation? It was in the early years of the 21st century that a philosopher named Nick Bostrom gave this idea a shape the modern world could understand. He didn't present it as science fiction or spiritual metaphor, but as a logical equation, a calm, reasoned argument that forced even the most rational minds to pause. Bostrom's idea was simple on the surface, yet unsettling in its depth. He proposed that one of three possibilities must be true. First, that almost all civilization like ours go extinct before reaching the level of technology capable of creating simulated realities. Second, that even if civilizations do reach that level, they would have no interest in running simulations of conscious beings like us. And third, that if they do run such simulations, then the number of simulated realities would vastly outnumber the single, original physical universe. And if that is the case, statistically, the odds that we are living in the original base reality are vanishingly small. It was a philosophical thunderclap that rippled through science, technology, and culture. Suddenly, the idea that we might be living in a simulation was no longer a story told by dreamers. It was a logical possibility supported by the mathematics of probability. Imagine it this way. If a future civilization could create perfect simulations, not just games, but fully conscious worlds, they would likely create more than one, maybe thousands, maybe billions. Each simulation would be filled with beings who believe they are real, who look up at the stars and wonder what lies beyond. If even a fraction of those simulations exist, then the odds are overwhelming that we're not in the original universe, but in one of the countless simulated ones. The brilliance of Bostrom's argument lies not in evidence, but in logic. It doesn't claim we are in a simulation, it simply shows that given what we know about technological growth and human curiosity, it is more likely than not. For many, this idea felt liberating. For others, it was quietly terrifying. It replaced the mystery of gods and spirits with something colder, yet strangely familiar. The idea that our universe might be code, that our world, our memories, even our emotions could be part of an elaborate program running on some unimaginable machine. And yet Bostrom's argument didn't come from cynicism. It wasn't about reducing life to numbers. It was about asking the biggest question of all: what is reality truly? To understand the magnitude of what Bostrom suggested, we must imagine what such an advanced civilization might look like. They would have computing systems capable of processing entire universes, machines powerful enough to simulate every particle, every atom, every neuron in a living brain. Within such a simulation, consciousness would not be imitation. It would be consciousness. Every simulated mind would experience the world as vividly as you do now. The sunlight would feel warm, the laughter would sound real, the pain would hurt. And if those experiences are indistinguishable from what we call reality, then how could we ever prove we are not within such a creation? Bostrom's argument hit the scientific community like a wave. Some physicists dismissed it as unprovable speculation, while others found it disturbingly plausible. Elon Musk, in one interview, famously said that the odds of us being in base reality are 1 in billions. Other thinkers, like Neil deGrasse Tyson, acknowledged that the simulation hypothesis, while strange, could not be logically ruled out. What made Bostrom's argument so compelling wasn't just its logic, it was the timing. Humanity was, at that very moment, building the foundations of its own simulated worlds. Virtual reality was emerging, artificial intelligence was learning, and computers were beginning to mimic creativity itself. We were living in the exact stage of civilization that Bostrom described, one poised at the edge of creating realities within realities. For the first time in human history, our philosophical questions and technological progress began to overlap perfectly. The deeper we peered into quantum physics, the more the universe behaved like code, rules, patterns, probabilities. The deeper we delved into artificial intelligence, the more we saw reflections of consciousness emerging in circuits and data. To many, it felt like we were walking toward a mirror, and with each step the reflection grew clearer. But what makes Bostrom's theory truly fascinating isn't only its logic, it's the feeling it evokes, the strange quietness that follows when you imagine that everything around you, the sound of your breath, the softness of your bed, the rhythm of your heartbeat, could be part of an intricate design. It's not frightening if you let it settle. In fact, it can be oddly comforting. Because if we are inside a simulation, it means our lives, our stories, our choices, all of them were created for a reason. Someone, or something, cared enough to build this world, to breathe detail into every leaf, every emotion, every star. The idea that we might be part of a grand design can bring a sense of meaning that even science alone sometimes cannot offer. Bostrom's hypothesis doesn't deny the mystery of existence. It simply gives it a different shape, a mathematical one, a digital one, but perhaps it's the same mystery that humanity has always felt, the sense that there is more beyond the veil of what we can perceive. In a way, his argument echoes the oldest spiritual questions in new, modern language. Where ancient mystics spoke of illusion, philosophers now speak of simulation. Where sages said the world is Maya, a dream woven by consciousness, scientists now discuss virtual models and quantum code. The language has changed, but the longing is the same, to understand who we are and why we're here. As the world drifts deeper into night and your mind floats between wakefulness and dreaming, you can almost sense it. The soft hum of an unseen system, the pulse of something larger. Maybe it's the gentle whisper of the code beneath reality. Maybe it's simply the rhythm of life itself. But one thing remains certain. The more we try to understand reality, the more it seems to shape itself around our questions. And perhaps that is the greatest clue of all. If we are in a simulation, then consciousness, your consciousness, is not an accident. It is the most valuable part of the design, because without awareness there is no world, there is no story, there is no meaning. Maybe that's the true secret hidden in Bostrom's idea, that no matter what layer of reality we occupy, what truly defines existence is the act of experiencing it. And so, as we rest beneath the stars, whether they are real or rendered, the question remains as vast and beautiful as ever. If we are living in a simulation, who or what is running it? And if they are watching, what do they hope we'll learn before we awaken? Chapter 6: Glitches in the Matrix, the strange patterns in reality. Have you ever felt that moment, that flicker in the rhythm of life, when something just doesn't feel quite right? A small fleeting instant that feels misplaced, as if reality itself hiccuped for a second. Perhaps you were walking down a familiar street and for a moment the world seemed to echo a memory you couldn't place. Or maybe you met someone who felt too familiar, like a scene you've already lived before. We often call it déjà vu. But what if moments like that are not just tricks of the mind? What if they're the faint static of something deeper? The subtle hum of a system refreshing itself, correcting an error, or simply revealing the edges of its design. For centuries, humans have noticed patterns in reality that don't quite fit within the boundaries of chance. Strange coincidences, mysterious synchronicities, improbable alignments. The kinds of things that make you pause and wonder whether there's more behind the curtain of ordinary life. People across the world describe similar moments, thinking of a friend just before they call, dreaming of an event that unfolds days later, or witnessing impossible timing, like catching the exact same phrase spoken by two people on opposite sides of a room. Science has long attributed these experiences to psychology, to the mind's tendency to seek patterns, to impose meaning on randomness. Yet, when the simulation theory entered modern thought, it offered a new lens. Perhaps these patterns are not imagined, but observed. Maybe, sometimes, we're glimpsing the underlying architecture of reality, the invisible framework that holds everything together. In a simulation, even the smallest imperfection might reveal something extraordinary. Think of a video game, a vast, detailed world that seems endless to the player. But no matter how intricate the coding, every digital world has limits, rules, and occasional flaws. Sometimes a texture loads too slowly, a shadow freezes for a frame, or a sound repeats itself in a loop. The player might not notice it right away, but when they do, they realize they're seeing beyond the illusion, into the system itself. When people talk about glitches in the matrix, that's the idea, that our universe too might show small anomalies, faint fingerprints of something artificial. Quantum physics, perhaps more than any other field, has given us such glimpses. At the smallest scales of reality, particles don't behave like solid things. They behave like probabilities. They exist in states of uncertainty until someone observes them. This strange phenomenon, known as the observer effect, makes reality appear responsive, as though the act of observation itself renders what we see. It's as if the universe waits to know what we're looking at before deciding what to show us. Imagine playing a video game that only loads the scenery in front of you. When you turn around, the rest of the world appears seamlessly, not because it was always there, but because the program generated it when you looked. Some physicists have compared quantum mechanics to that kind of system, where observation, not matter, is the foundation of existence. The double-slit experiment, one of the most famous in science, reveals just how strange this can be. When scientists fire particles like electrons through two slits toward a screen, the pattern they create depends on whether someone is observing them. If no one is watching, the particles behave like waves, interfering with each other as though they exist everywhere at once. But when they are observed, they act like solid points, choosing one slit or the other, as if awareness itself collapses the possibilities into a single, concrete reality. It's baffling, almost poetic, and for some, it feels like a sign that the universe doesn't exist as a complete, fixed structure, but as a system that generates experience when consciousness interacts with it. Just as a simulation reveals its environment to the player only when the player turns to see it. Some scientists see these phenomena as mathematical curiosities, not evidence of a simulation. Yet, the more we explore the microstructure of reality, the more it seems to behave like information, discrete, rule-based, responsive. The universe, when viewed closely, doesn't appear infinitely smooth. It's granular, pixelated at the smallest measurable scale, at something called the Planck length. Below that, space and time stop behaving like continuous fabric and start behaving like quantized units, as if the cosmos is composed of the smallest possible bits of existence. In a way, this discovery mirrors what happens on your screen right now. The image you see may look smooth, but zoom in far enough and you'll see it's made of pixels, tiny finite squares of colour that together create the illusion of continuity. If reality has such a limit, a smallest measurable distance, a smallest possible unit of time, could it mean the universe itself is built from discrete digital code, just like our simulations? It's an unsettling thought, but also a strangely elegant one. Everywhere we look, the universe speaks the language of mathematics, from the spirals of galaxies to the symmetry of snowflakes, from the geometry of flowers to the rhythm of planetary orbits. Everything seems to follow rules. There is harmony in motion, logic in beauty. To some, this is proof of divine order. To others, it's evidence of a designed system, a cosmic algorithm unfolding. But then there are moments that don't feel so ordered. People have documented eerie coincidences, numbers repeating in their lives, dreams that seem to predict future events, random patterns that feel purposeful. Are these just stories the mind creates, or are they cracks in the illusion? Moments when the simulation's logic overlaps with our perception in strange ways. Imagine that you're dreaming. Inside the dream, you experience an entire world. Places, people, even physics. Yet all of it is being rendered in real time by your mind. Occasionally when dreams break down, we notice impossible transitions. One place blending instantly into another, the sky changing colour without reason, the story resetting mid-scene. When that happens, you realise that the dream was never solid. It was always fluid, built from consciousness itself. What if waking life is not so different? Some simulation theorists suggest that synchronicities, those meaningful coincidences Carl Jung described, are the universe's debugging process. Small adjustments made by the underlying system to keep the storyline of reality running smoothly. Others think that these anomalies appear when our consciousness briefly shifts frequencies, aligning with the layer of reality that exists behind the visible one. Like tuning into the static between radio channels and catching a fragment of another song. Even scientific research has observed patterns that shouldn't exist. Cosmic background radiation, the afterglow of the Big Bang, contains peculiar alignments, strange anomalies in the otherwise uniform fabric of the universe. Physicists don't yet agree on what they mean. But to a mind open to the idea of simulation, such patterns could be hints of a larger structure. The mathematical scaffolding behind space-time itself. And then there are the human glitches, stories that defy easy explanation. People who vanish and reappear in places they've never been, time slips that distort memory, reality seeming to reset after intense emotional crisis. These stories, though often dismissed, persist across cultures. They echo ancient myths of worlds within worlds, dreams within dreams. Perhaps in moments of deep stillness or stress, our perception drifts, and for a heartbeat, we glimpse another layer of reality, a flicker between worlds. But what's most fascinating is not whether these glitches prove anything. It's how they make us feel. They stir something instinctive, something ancient. They remind us that no matter how much we think we understand, reality remains mysterious. The fact that we even notice these irregularities might mean our consciousness is not entirely bound by the program. If this is a simulation, then our awareness might be the one thing that transcends it. And so, as you lie here listening, breathing softly, sinking deeper into the quiet rhythm of night, imagine this. The world around you is not static. It's alive, breathing, adapting, shimmering just beyond perception. Every second, every thought, every dream might be both your creation and your discovery. The so-called glitches in the matrix may not be flaws at all. They might be invitations, gentle reminders that reality is not what it seems, and that behind every flicker of strangeness lies a whisper of something greater. Because even if our universe is simulated, what it's trying to show us is profoundly real. The awareness that sees, feels, and wonders, that perhaps is the truest part of all. Chapter 7. The Quantum Code. Physics' Hidden Digital Nature. When you look up at the night sky, at the endless darkness sprinkled with quiet stars, it's easy to feel that the universe is infinite, limitless, eternal. But what if, deep down, it isn't? What if, at its most fundamental level, reality isn't continuous at all, but made of tiny indivisible pieces of information, like pixels on a screen, like bits in a program? This is where the simulation theory becomes more than just an idea. It begins to touch science. Because when physicists peer deeper and deeper into the fabric of existence, what they find looks less like matter and more like code. Let's begin at the smallest known scale, far smaller than atoms, smaller even than the particles that make up atoms. It's called the Planck length, the smallest possible unit of space. Below this scale, space itself stops behaving as smooth and continuous. It becomes grainy, quantized, like static at the edge of perception. It's an unimaginably small distance, about 100 billion times smaller than a proton. And yet, it represents something profound. The point where the laws of physics break down and reality begins to look suspiciously digital. If you think of our universe as a kind of cosmic computer, the Planck length could be the size of its smallest pixel. Everything you see, every shape, every motion, every flash of light, could be composed of these tiniest building blocks, rendered in real time by the underlying system. Some scientists call this idea digital physics, the notion that the universe operates on discrete units of information, much like the ones and zeros inside your computer. Imagine zooming in on reality frame by frame until you see the grid beneath it. Every atom, every vibration, every flicker of energy, processed, updated, and refreshed billions of times per second. The stars above you, the air you breathe, the thoughts that drift through your mind, all running on the same universal algorithm. It's a beautiful and slightly haunting thought, because if this is true, it means that everything that exists is, at its essence, information. We tend to think of information as something humans create, numbers, language, code. But in the universe's language, information may be the very fabric of existence. Matter is not solid stuff. It's data. The atoms that make up your body are vibrations of energy, and that energy carries information. Every photon of light, every quantum particle, behaves not like a continuous flow, but like a series of discrete events. On or off, yes or no. Like binary code. And when we observe those particles, they seem to respond. They don't reveal their position or state until measured, as if the act of observation itself triggers the system to calculate and display the outcome. Think of it like a video game engine. It doesn't render the entire world all at once. It only generates what the player sees in real time. Why waste power showing what no one's looking at? In the same way, the universe may not render every possibility until someone or something observes it. This is what makes quantum physics so extraordinary and so strange. Reality behaves like a program optimized for efficiency. It only computes what's necessary when it's necessary. In the quiet hum of night, as you lie still, consider that the stars above you might not exist in their full detail until someone looks at them. The atoms in your hand might not have precise positions until your eyes bring them into awareness, and yet, everything flows in perfect order. Physicists have noticed another peculiar thing. The universe seems to have a finite amount of information that can fit into any region of space. This principle is called the Bekenstein bound, a limit on how much data can be stored within a physical system. It's as though the cosmos has memory capacity like a vast hard drive. The more energy you pack into a space, the more data it can hold, but only up to a point. Beyond that, it collapses into something else entirely, like a black hole. And black holes themselves, those mysterious cosmic voids, hold secrets that sound eerily digital. When matter falls into one, it seems to disappear. But according to physicists like Stephen Hawking, the information it carries is never truly lost. It's encoded on the black hole surface, stored as bits of data, like the information written on a computer disk. From these discoveries came a revolutionary idea, the holographic principle. It suggests that everything within the universe, all matter, all energy, all consciousness, could be encoded on a distant two-dimensional boundary, like a cosmic screen projecting our 3D world. In other words, the universe might not just be digital, it might be a hologram. If that sounds strange, imagine this. Every moment you live, every emotion you feel, every atom that makes up your being, all may be expressions of encoded information on a far-off cosmic surface. The world you experience isn't fake, but it might be a projection, a perfect simulation of reality rendered from the data beneath it. Some scientists, like John Archibald Wheeler, summed it up with a simple phrase, "it from bit," meaning everything that exists, it, arises from fundamental bits of information. It's a poetic description of a digital universe, one that whispers the same truth across every field of science. Beneath the complexity of reality lies a simplicity, a rhythm of zeros and ones, a cosmic binary heartbeat. Even time itself, which feels so smooth and endless, might not be continuous. Some theories suggest that time flows in discrete moments, tiny ticks of a universal clock. Each tick represents an update in the simulation, a new frame rendered by the cosmic engine. What feels like fluid time might actually be the rapid refreshing of reality's code, far too fast for us to notice. And here's where it becomes even more astonishing. Our perception, our consciousness, may be part of that rendering process. When you observe the world, you collapse probabilities into form. You bring data to life. You help render reality. You're both player and processor, both observer and participant. So when you watch a sunset fade into darkness, what you're really seeing might be the universe's code unfolding in colour and light, the algorithm expressing itself in beauty. And perhaps that beauty is intentional, because if reality is made of information, then information itself might be designed for meaning. The patterns in nature, the symmetry of snowflakes, the orbit of planets, the geometry of shells are not random. They follow precise rules that repeat across scales, from the microscopic to the cosmic. It's as if the universe speaks one language and everything, matter, energy, thought, is a different dialect of that same language. The more we learn about physics, the clearer it becomes. The world is not a chaotic accident. It is structured, coded, deliberate. And whether that design is the product of mathematics, divine intention, or an advanced civilization, the result is the same. A universe that functions like the most elegant simulation imaginable. So as you drift deeper into thought, perhaps into sleep, imagine yourself surrounded not by solid walls of reality, but by light, by information. A sea of invisible code humming softly beneath every surface. The air around you, the stars above you, the thoughts within you, all part of one great digital symphony. Maybe in the quiet between moments, when you feel the world slow down, you can almost sense it, the pulse of the simulation steady and serene, breathing reality into being with each passing instant. And within that stillness, perhaps you'll realize something beautiful. Even if the universe is built on code, what you experience within it, love, wonder, awe, is not artificial, it's real, because it is you who gives it meaning. Chapter 8. The speed limit of reality. Why light might be the frame rate. If the universe is a grand simulation, then light could be its heartbeat, its constant rhythm, its frame rate. Everything we know, every motion, every image, every sound, depends on light. It is not only what allows us to see, it is what allows the universe to exist in a visible, measurable form. And the speed of light, that mysterious cosmic limit, might hold the key to understanding why the universe behaves the way it does. Light always travels at the same speed, about 300,000 kilometers per second, no matter where you are or how fast you're moving. This isn't just a scientific curiosity, it's one of the deepest truths we've ever discovered. Nothing can move faster. Not matter, not information, not even thought. At first, that might seem arbitrary. Why should there be a universal speed limit? But when you look closer, it begins to make sense if reality itself is being updated in frames, like a simulation running at a fixed refresh rate. Think of a film. The motion on screen looks smooth, but it's really a series of still images shown rapidly one after another. The faster the frame rate, the smoother it looks, but there's still a limit. Beyond that, you wouldn't notice any improvement, because your perception and the medium itself can't process it any faster. Now imagine that the universe has a maximum processing speed, a limit to how quickly information can travel from one point to another. That limit, according to physics, is the speed of light. If information is the true fabric of reality, then light speed represents how fast that information can move through the system. In other words, it may be the refresh rate of existence, the tempo at which the simulation updates itself. Whenever something happens, an atom vibrates, a star flares, or you blink your eyes, that event sends information rippling through space at light speed. Beyond that, nothing can go faster, because the cosmic processor can't handle updates any quicker. Everything happens in perfect synchronization with this universal rhythm. This idea can explain why time and space are so deeply intertwined. When you move faster, time slows down. Distances stretch. Energy changes. These are not illusions. They're how the universe preserves its speed limit. The laws of physics bend so that nothing ever exceeds the ultimate speed of information. To understand this, imagine reality as a vast ocean of data, each wave representing a moment. As you move through it, you displace those waves differently. If you travel close to light speed, your perception of time changes, not because of magic, but because your movement through the data field alters how information reaches you. From your perspective, time flows normally, but to someone watching you, your clock seems to tick slower, your world seems compressed. The simulation adjusts to maintain balance. Every observer, no matter their speed, always measures light moving at the same rate. This balancing act, time slowing, space stretching, is what Einstein called relativity. But in the language of digital reality, it can be seen as the system ensuring consistency for every observer within the simulation. No glitches, no contradictions. The rules are absolute, yet perfectly flexible. Now think about what light actually is, both a wave and a particle, both energy and information. It behaves like the messenger of the universe, carrying data from one point to another. Every photon that reaches your eye from a distant star has travelled across space for thousands, even millions of years, yet it has aged not a second. For light, time doesn't flow at all. It's as if, from light's perspective, the journey from one end of the universe to the other happens in an instant. There's no waiting, no passage of time, just pure existence. In the simulation analogy, that's what happens when data moves at the maximum processing speed. The delay between cause and effect disappears entirely. So perhaps, when you see light shimmering on water, or sunlight breaking through morning clouds, you're witnessing the raw pulse of the universe, the very fabric of the code in motion. The constancy of light gives reality its stability. If light's speed ever changed, even slightly, everything would collapse. Atoms wouldn't hold together, chemistry would fail, life, memory, and consciousness would vanish. It is the fixed tempo of the simulation, ensuring that all of existence moves in harmony, and that harmony is everywhere. When you think of a clock, you imagine something mechanical, like gears turning, hands ticking. But time itself doesn't tick the way clocks do. Time is not a substance, not a thing you can touch. It's a relationship between events, between one update of the simulation and the next. When light travels, it marks those updates. Each wave of light, each oscillation, can be seen as a beat of the cosmic metronome. Billions upon billions of these beats happen every second, and together they weave the rhythm of the universe, what we experience as the flow of time. And so, when physicists discovered that light speed never changes, no matter how it's measured, it was like discovering that the universe plays one perfect note, always the same, everywhere. A fundamental tone that holds all of reality together. In this way, light is not just illumination, it is structure. It defines what can exist, how fast things can happen, and even how we experience reality itself. Imagine that every photon is like a single instruction in a cosmic program. When countless photons move together, they create the visual world. Color, reflection, warmth. The surface of a river, the glimmer of a star, the glow of a candle. All of them are results of those instructions being executed in perfect synchronization. And when your eyes receive that light, they too become part of the loop. Your brain processes the photons, translating them into experience. But here's the astonishing thing. That process, too, is governed by light. The neurons in your brain communicate using electrical impulses that move at a fraction of light speed. Even your thoughts are shaped by this cosmic limit. You're a part of the same system, the same program. When you think, move, or feel, information moves through you, bounded by the same universal speed. You're not separate from the simulation. You're its living expression. It's humbling to think that if light is the frame rate of the universe, then every second of your life is a dance of countless frames. Frames of energy, frames of thought, frames of being. Reality refreshes itself faster than you could ever notice, yet your consciousness rides that flow effortlessly. Every blink, every breath, every heartbeat is a moment in the stream of creation. And maybe, when you feel time slow down, when you pause to watch sunlight spill across a quiet room, what you're really sensing is the rhythm of the simulation itself, the stillness between frames, the pulse of existence made visible. So, as you rest and drift deeper into calmness, remember this. The speed of light is not just a scientific constant. It is the gentle heartbeat of the cosmos, keeping time for every star, every atom, every living thing. You're not separate from it. You're made of it. You're part of the light that measures time, the light that builds space, the light that renders reality itself. And somewhere, beyond your awareness, that light continues to move, silent, steady, infinite, carrying the code of creation from one moment to the next. In that knowledge, there is peace. Because no matter where you are or how far you travel, you're always in rhythm with the universe, always part of its perfect eternal frame rate. Chapter 9. Conscious Observers. The role of awareness in rendering reality. When you close your eyes and listen to the quiet around you, the world seems to pause. The ticking of a clock fades. Your thoughts begin to drift, and for a moment it feels as though reality itself softens. But then, when you open your eyes again, the room returns. Familiar, detailed, complete. It's as if your attention called the world back into focus. For centuries, philosophers and scientists have wondered about this, about the mysterious connection between consciousness and the physical world. Why does reality seem to depend on observation? Why does something as personal as awareness appear to have power over the universe itself? This question lies at the heart of both spirituality and physics, and perhaps it's the key to understanding the simulation we call existence. In the quantum world, where particles behave like probabilities, something extraordinary happens. Until observed, a particle doesn't have a definite position or state. It exists in many possibilities at once, a blur of potential. But the moment it's measured, it collapses into one reality. This is known as the observer effect. It suggests that the act of observation doesn't just reveal reality, it creates it. Imagine a vast field of infinite possibilities stretching across existence like waves on a dark ocean. Every potential version of reality exists there, every thought, every path, every outcome, and yet out of all that endless potential, only one version crystallizes, the one you observe. You, the observer, are not a bystander in the universe. You're an active participant in its unfolding. In the language of simulation theory, you are like a user interacting with the system. The world doesn't fully render until you look. It doesn't need to. The simulation conserves its resources by displaying only what's relevant to your perspective. Look away, and the code sleeps. Look closely, and it awakens. Light, sound, texture, motion. You might think this sounds mystical, but even in modern science, the evidence is there. The famous double-slit experiment showed that particles of light behave differently when they are being observed. When unobserved, they act like waves spreading out into multiple possibilities. But when watched, they behave like solid particles, following a single path. It's as though awareness itself changes the outcome, as if the universe adjusts its behavior depending on whether it's being perceived. That simple experiment shook the foundation of physics. It implied that consciousness and matter might not be separate after all, that the observer and the observed are part of the same phenomenon. If we are indeed living in a simulation, this connection begins to make sense. In any simulated world, the user's perception determines what needs to be displayed. A video game doesn't simulate every molecule of every mountain. It only renders what the player sees. Reality might work the same way. Perhaps the universe doesn't waste energy rendering what no one perceives. Instead, it stores information as probabilities, ready to be rendered the moment consciousness looks. In this sense, your awareness might not simply exist within the simulation. It might be what gives the simulation purpose. Consider the stillness of a forest at dawn. The mist hangs low, the air is cool, and sunlight filters through the trees in delicate rays. For billions of years, that forest existed in quiet cycles of growth and decay. Yet without an observer, there was no experience of its beauty, no meaning in its silence. The trees still stood. The rivers still flowed. But only when awareness entered, when something could see, did beauty come alive. Awareness transforms existence into experience, and that transformation is everything. It's what gives life color, sound, texture, story. Without consciousness, the stars are just burning gases. With it, they become constellations, symbols, guides, myths. If the universe is a simulation, consciousness could be the ultimate interface, the bridge between data and meaning. It's not just that we observe reality, it's that reality, in some profound way, needs us to observe it to be complete. But what is consciousness itself? Science can describe the brain, the neurons firing, the electrical signals moving from one cell to another. But the subjective experience of being, the feeling of you, remains a mystery. No matter how deeply we map the brain, we can't quite locate where awareness lives. We can measure activity, but not the spark that makes you you. Some scientists believe consciousness emerges from complexity, that when matter organizes itself in just the right way, self-awareness arises. Others think it's the opposite, that consciousness is not created by matter at all, but that matter emerges from consciousness. In the context of a simulation, the latter view fits beautifully. If the universe is information, and consciousness is the one perceiving and interpreting that information, then perhaps consciousness is the fundamental reality, the source, the observer that allows the code to become experience. You might think of yourself as a character inside a vast program, but what if you're also part of the programmer? What if consciousness is both the player and the game, exploring itself through infinite forms? This perspective turns everything we know upside down, yet it brings a quiet kind of peace. Because if consciousness is at the heart of reality, then you are not a random accident. You are part of the very reason the universe exists. It could mean that existence itself is an act of awareness, that the cosmos is conscious, and you are one of the ways it sees itself. When you gaze at the night sky, you're not just looking at distant stars. You're the universe observing its own beauty, recognizing itself across light years of space. The eyes that see, the stars that shine, both are made of the same awareness, reflecting back endlessly. This is what mystics have whispered for millennia, that consciousness is the foundation of all things, that the physical world is a projection of the inner one, that life is the universe dreaming itself awake. And perhaps that's why the simulation theory resonates so deeply. It doesn't just question what reality is, it invites you to wonder who is perceiving it. If consciousness renders reality, then what you focus on becomes your world. Your thoughts, your beliefs, your attention, they shape what the simulation shows you. When you dwell in fear, you see reasons to fear. When you dwell in wonder, the world becomes filled with wonder. It is as if reality mirrors your state of mind, an interactive feedback loop between the observer and the observed. This is why awareness is powerful. When you shift your perception, you shift the universe you experience. And when you rest, when your mind quiets, the simulation slows. The waves of probability settle. The code becomes soft and silent. In sleep, the observer retreats, and reality fades gently into the background, waiting for you to awaken and look again. But consciousness never disappears. It simply dreams, and perhaps in those dreams it explores other versions of reality, other simulations within the simulation. As you breathe slowly now, imagine that your awareness is the light through which the universe sees itself. Every breath, every thought, every heartbeat sends ripples into the fabric of existence. You're not outside the system, you're the reason it glows. And when you finally close your eyes and the world goes dark, remember, it is not ending. It is simply waiting to be seen again. The universe, after all, needs you to look, because through your eyes, it becomes real. Chapter 10. Information is everything. The universe is data. If you sit quietly for long enough, letting your breath slow and your thoughts drift into stillness, something beautiful begins to happen. The noise of the world fades, and beneath it all, beneath the rush of time, beneath the pulse of your own heartbeat, there's a subtle sense of order, an invisible pattern holding everything together. Some scientists now believe that this hidden order might not be made of matter or even energy, but of something more fundamental: information. The idea sounds simple, yet it changes everything. It suggests that the universe, all of it, from the smallest particle to the largest galaxy, might not be a machine made of physical parts, but a vast computation made of bits. In this view, what we call reality is not a solid structure, but the expression of data. Every atom, every photon, every heartbeat, every thought, encoded in a cosmic program running seamlessly across time and space. This idea began with a physicist named John Archibald Wheeler, one of the great minds who helped shape our understanding of the universe. Wheeler proposed a phrase that would echo through the halls of theoretical physics: it from a bit. He believed that everything, every it, meaning every particle or field, ultimately arises from binary information: ones and zeros, yes and no, presence and absence. In other words, reality itself comes from the answers to simple, fundamental questions, information being processed at the deepest level of existence. It from bit means that the universe, at its core, might be less like a clockwork mechanism and more like a quantum computer. And in a way, this makes sense. Because if you look closely enough at the world, at its smallest scales, you no longer find solid things. You find probabilities, relationships, patterns of information interacting and exchanging data. Imagine space and time not as a continuous smooth fabric, but as a digital grid, an intricate lattice made of discrete units of information. Every second, every inch of space, every movement, every thought, all part of a vast computation happening everywhere, all the time. Physicists call this emerging perspective digital physics, and it's one of the most fascinating revolutions in modern science. It suggests that our universe might be the ultimate simulation, not because it's fake, but because it's informational at its core. If that sounds abstract, think of it this way. When you watch a movie on a screen, what you see is not actually people, or places, or light. It's all data. Tiny packets of digital information decoded by a processor and displayed as moving images. Yet to your eyes, it feels completely real. What if the universe works the same way? Perhaps what we see as solid matter is just information being processed by the fundamental code of reality. The mountains, the oceans, the stars, all data rendered into form by a cosmic algorithm so perfect that we can live inside it, breathe it, and never realize its code. Even the quantum world seems to whisper this truth. At that level, particles don't have definite properties until they are measured, until information about them is exchanged. This means that reality is defined not by physical presence, but by the information relationships between things. Some researchers have gone even further, proposing that space-time itself might be an emergent property, a kind of holographic illusion created by the flow of information. This brings us to one of the most mind-bending ideas in all of science, the holographic principle. It began with black holes. Physicists noticed something strange when studying how information behaves near them. The amount of information, or entropy, that a black hole could contain wasn't determined by its volume, but by its surface area. That suggested something astonishing. All the information that describes a three-dimensional space might actually be stored on a two-dimensional surface surrounding it. In other words, the entire universe might be like a hologram, a three-dimensional projection of information encoded on a distant boundary. Imagine for a moment that everything you see, the stars above, the chair beneath you, the gentle motion of your breathing, might be the projection of a vast cosmic data field. The entire 3D world around you could be the rendering of something fundamentally informational, encoded far beyond what we can perceive. And yet, this doesn't make our experience any less real. Just as a hologram feels real when you look at it, our universe feels tangible because it's being rendered with perfect precision. The difference lies only in what's beneath the surface. When you think about it, this idea feels strangely intuitive. Everywhere we look, we find patterns of information. DNA carries the code of life. The brain processes data through networks of neurons. Every human thought, every emotion, every dream, all of it encoded in electrochemical signals. If life itself is information, then perhaps existence is too. In a quiet way, this realization unites the physical and the spiritual. It suggests that reality isn't a random accident of matter, but a meaningful flow of information, a story written in the language of energy and consciousness. It also brings a strange kind of comfort, because if the universe is information, then nothing is ever truly lost. Information, by the laws of physics, cannot disappear. It can change form, it can scatter, but it always exists somewhere. When you think of the people you've loved, the memories you hold, the moments that shaped you, they might still exist in some form, woven into the infinite code of the cosmos. Every laugh, every kindness, every thought, part of the great data tapestry of reality. Some scientists now believe that even consciousness itself might be a pattern of information, one that can, in theory, exist independently of the physical form. This is where the lines between science and spirituality begin to blur, and where simulation theory begins to feel not just possible, but deeply poetic. Because if consciousness is information, and information cannot die, then perhaps we, the observers, are not temporary beings after all. We are data experiencing itself, awareness navigating through the code. So the question becomes not just what reality is, but who is perceiving it and why. In the language of simulation, this could mean that consciousness is the user interface of the system, the way the code becomes visible to itself. In this view, you are not a random glitch in the machine. You're the awareness that allows the machine to exist at all. And maybe, just maybe, everything that exists, every galaxy, every atom, every dream, is part of a grand information exchange between consciousness and creation. When you look out at the night sky, you're not just seeing stars, you're reading the output of a cosmic code, ancient, perfect, and alive. The light from distant suns travels for billions of years, carrying data through the dark, waiting for your eyes, your awareness, to decode it into meaning. In that sense, the universe and the observer are one continuous system, endlessly exchanging information. You're not apart from reality. You're part of its processing loop, a node of awareness helping the cosmos to understand itself. Perhaps this is why we feel an unshakable sense of connection to the world around us, to the ocean, to the sky, to one another. Beneath all differences, beneath the illusions of separation, we're made of the same thing, the same light, the same code, the same breath. Information is not cold or mechanical. It is alive. It carries the essence of being. It is the canvas on which experience is painted. And when you finally rest, when your mind drifts into stillness and the world fades into silence, perhaps what you return to is not emptiness, but pure information, the raw potential of existence before it takes form, like the code that sleeps before the game begins, like a song waiting to be played. The universe may be data, but it is also a dream, and through you that dream learns what it means to feel. Chapter 11. Dreams, DMT and alternate simulations. As we drift into sleep each night, something extraordinary happens. Our waking world dissolves into darkness, and suddenly we find ourselves somewhere else. A world just as vivid, just as emotional, just as real. In that moment, our brain becomes both the architect and the traveller, the programmer and the player. We call this strange experience a dream. Dreams have fascinated humanity for as long as we've been conscious enough to question our own experiences. They're our nightly voyages into realities that seem untethered from the physical world, where the rules of gravity, time and logic no longer apply. In dreams, we can fly through ancient cities, speak to the dead, or live entire lives in mere minutes. But what if dreams aren't just random flickers of the sleeping mind? What if they're a kind of simulation within the simulation, a deeply personal, internal, virtual world generated by consciousness itself? When you dream, your brain constructs an entire environment, complete with landscapes, people and sensations, all from pure data stored within your mind. The brain becomes a world builder, creating light without photons, sound without air, and touch without matter. It's a closed system, a reality running on biological code. From a simulation perspective, it's strikingly similar to the digital worlds we create using computers. Scientists who study dreams often describe them as predictive simulations, the brain's way of rehearsing, processing and organizing reality. But some thinkers, especially those drawn to the simulation theory, take this further. They suggest that dreaming may be the purest form of experiencing what it means to exist in a simulated environment, a microcosm of the larger system we inhabit. In dreams, the boundaries between reality and illusion blur completely. The same could be said about our waking life if our universe too is simulated. What makes a dream different from waking reality then might simply be the level of coherence, the rules that govern one simulation versus another. Now consider another doorway to these alternate states, one that doesn't come naturally, but through the mysterious chemistry of the mind. Deep within our brain, there exists a molecule known as DMT, dimethyltryptamine, sometimes called the spirit molecule. It's produced naturally by the human body, and for reasons not yet fully understood, it can launch consciousness into experiences that are often described as more real than reality itself. When people ingest or experience DMT, either through ritual, meditation, or near-death experiences, they often report astonishingly similar encounters. They describe entering worlds that feel architecturally complex, illuminated with geometric light, populated by strange beings, or filled with messages that seem deeply intelligent. Many say they return with the unshakable feeling that they visited another layer of existence. From the lens of simulation theory, such experiences raise profound questions. Could substances like DMT be temporarily shifting our perception, tuning our consciousness to another frequency of the simulation? If reality is information-based, perhaps these altered states allow us to access different data streams, like switching servers in a vast network of realities. Some neuroscientists would argue that these visions are simply products of hyperactive brain activity, random bursts of imagery caused by disrupted neural networks. But others, including physicists and philosophers, see these patterns as clues. They ask, why do so many people across cultures and generations report the same experiences, the same archetypes, the same hyper-real landscapes? It's as if there's a shared database of symbols and environments, a collective unconscious that might exist beyond the limits of individual biology. Carl Jung believed in such a thing long before the idea of digital simulations existed. But today, with our growing understanding of virtual reality and artificial worlds, the idea takes on a striking new form. Maybe the mind is logging into a hidden sub-program of reality, one we can't normally access when fully awake. Dreams and psychedelics may be different pathways to the same mysterious truth, that consciousness itself is capable of generating entire realities. And if that's the case, it forces us to reconsider what's truly real. Because if your mind can create a convincing world in sleep or in a DMT vision, who's to say the waking world isn't being generated in a similar way, just at a higher level with more stability and persistence? Ancient cultures viewed dreams as messages from the divine, and psychedelic experiences as doorways to other realms. Modern science often dismisses these as brain phenomena, but the simulation perspective invites a middle ground. It suggests that maybe both are true. The dream world and the DMT realm might not be separate from the real world at all, but rather different modes of perception within a vast informational landscape. Perhaps when you dream, your consciousness disconnects from the main server of physical reality and enters a local simulation, one running entirely within your neural code. And perhaps DMT or near-death experiences temporarily break that boundary, letting you peek beyond the veil into the deeper architecture of existence. The question then becomes, are these glimpses errors in the system, glitches that momentarily reveal the machinery behind reality, or are they intentional features built into the simulation as ways for consciousness to remember its true nature? If our universe is indeed a vast informational construct, maybe dreams and altered states are reminders, subtle nudges that whisper there is more beyond this layer. They invite us to question what's truly real, to explore our inner worlds as much as the outer, and to realize that consciousness may be the ultimate traveler, capable of moving between countless simulations. As the night deepens and you drift closer to sleep, that thought lingers like a soft echo. Each dream, each vision, each spark of imagination maybe another universe blooming within you. And perhaps, in the quiet of the dream world, the simulation reveals a truth the waking world keeps hidden, that we are not merely living inside the code, we are the code itself, dreaming of being real. Chapter 12. Testing the simulation, but the experiments trying to prove it. For centuries, humanity's greatest discoveries have begun with a question, and perhaps the boldest one of all is this: can we prove that reality is not real? If our universe is indeed a simulation, then somewhere, beneath all the atoms and stars and galaxies, there must be code, a hidden layer of digital structure. And if that's true, then it should, in theory, leave traces, evidence, patterns that don't quite belong to a natural, continuous reality, but instead resemble something built, processed, or rendered. Scientists across the world have begun to wonder what those traces might look like. They've asked, what kind of fingerprints would a simulated universe leave behind? And in doing so, they've designed experiments that, in subtle but revolutionary ways, try to catch the simulation in the act. Let's start with one of the simplest and most poetic ideas: pixelation. When you look at a digital photograph on a screen, it appears smooth and seamless. But zoom in far enough, and you begin to see the truth. Tiny squares of colour, little pixels that make up the illusion of continuity. The image isn't truly continuous, it's made of discrete pieces of information. Some physicists believe that the same might be true for the universe, that space and time, the very fabric of existence, are not infinitely divisible, but instead composed of tiny, indivisible units, like the pixels of a screen or the code in a computer program. If that's true, then the smooth flow of reality is just an illusion. The real universe would be pixelated at the smallest possible scale, the Planck scale, which is about 1 trillion times smaller than an atom. And if we could somehow detect this granularity, we might find the first clue that our world is not analog but digital. In 2012, scientists at Fermilab in Illinois proposed an experiment called the holometer. Its purpose was to detect tiny vibrations, fluctuations in space-time itself, that could reveal a fundamental limit to how smoothly space is structured. If the universe were pixelated, these fluctuations would show up as a kind of background noise, a faint static at the edge of measurement. The results were inconclusive, but the fact that such an experiment could even be conceived shows how far the simulation hypothesis has crept into serious scientific thought. Another possible signature of simulation comes from the behavior of high-energy particles, specifically cosmic rays. These are particles that travel across the universe at nearly the speed of light, often created by violent cosmic events like supernovae or black holes. Physicists have noticed something strange. Cosmic rays seem to have an upper energy limit. They never exceed a certain threshold, as if the universe itself enforces a speed limit. If our universe were a simulation, this might make sense. Just as a video game can only render so much detail or process so much data at once, a simulated cosmos might cap the energy levels of its particles to maintain stability. One physicist compared this to how video games work. When you play an open-world game, the computer doesn't render the entire world at once, only the part that's relevant to the player. Everything beyond your point of view exists in a low-resolution state, waiting to be rendered when needed. Could the same be true for us? Quantum mechanics, the science of the very small, offers even stranger hints. At the subatomic level, particles don't seem to exist in fixed states until they're observed. Before measurement, they exist in probabilities, waves of potential, and only when observed do they collapse into something definite. To some scientists, This sounds eerily similar to how a simulation might conserve processing power, by rendering details only when a player looks at them. If no one is observing a part of the universe, maybe it doesn't exist in high detail, it's just data waiting to be called upon. Then there's the discovery that the equations governing quantum mechanics resemble error-correcting codes, the same kind of codes used in computers to detect and fix glitches in data transmission. In 2014, a team of physicists from MIT and the University of Maryland noticed that the structure of space-time in some theoretical models behaves like a self-correcting information network. In simple terms, the universe seems to be checking its work, constantly ensuring that the information describing reality remains stable. It's as if the cosmos has built-in software maintenance. This leads to one of the most mind-bending ideas in modern physics, the holographic principle. It suggests that our three-dimensional reality might actually be encoded on a two-dimensional surface at the edge of the universe, much like how a hologram stores 3D images on a flat sheet. Imagine that everything you see, everything you feel, is the projection of deeper information stored on a cosmic boundary. To us, it appears real and solid, but in truth, it's data unfolding in space and time, a universe of light and code, beautifully simulated. Of course, all of this remains theory, fascinating, beautiful, but unproven. Yet the experiments continue. Researchers are designing ever more sophisticated ways to probe the structure of space-time, to look for digital patterns, or to find limitations in how energy and information behave. And then there's an even stranger twist. If our universe is a simulation, then the simulations we create, our virtual worlds, our AI environments, might themselves become evidence. In labs and on computers around the world, humans are already building simulated universes. Scientists run models of entire galaxies, weather systems, or the spread of life across planets. Game developers build vast virtual worlds filled with characters that react and adapt. Artificial intelligence is learning to imagine, to create its own simulated realities within the ones we've built. Each of these digital creations is, in a sense, a universe within a universe, a reflection of our own cosmos, scaled down and simplified, but governed by rules, code, and information just the same. If we can create simulated worlds sophisticated enough to fool conscious beings, then perhaps our own creators, whoever or whatever they are, did the same for us. And if we are capable of creating simulations that contain intelligent life, it strengthens the logic that we might already be living inside one. After all, if simulated realities can exist, and if intelligent beings can create them, then statistically, the number of simulated worlds would far outnumber the original base reality. And that would mean that odds are overwhelmingly high that we are inside one of those simulations, not the original, but a layer built upon layers. So far, no experiment has conclusively proven that we live inside a simulation. But each discovery, every strange quantum behavior, every digital echo in the equations, keeps the question alive. And maybe that's the point. Perhaps the simulation was never meant to be exposed fully, but only hinted at, as if reality itself wants us to come closer, to keep asking, to evolve through curiosity. If that's true, then every telescope pointed at the stars, every particle accelerator smashing atoms, every dream of understanding the cosmos might not just be the search for truth, it might be the simulation discovering itself. And maybe somewhere far beyond our perception, the observers, the programmers, the architects are watching, waiting to see if we ever figure out what we are. Chapter 13: AI and the Creation of New Realities. As the night deepens and the world outside your window drifts into silence, imagine this. Somewhere, right now, inside a dimly lit room filled with a soft hum of computers, a new world is being born, not a planet, not a star, but a world of data, pixels, and thought, a reality made of code. This is where the story of artificial intelligence begins to intertwine with the simulation hypothesis in the most profound and fascinating way. Because if our universe might be a simulation, then perhaps, by creating intelligent machines capable of imagination, we are slowly becoming what our own creators once were, architects of new realities. It's a strange, beautiful loop, the created becoming the creators. For most of human history, we could only dream of building worlds. We painted them on cave walls, wrote them into books, and told stories around fires. But those worlds existed only in imagination. Then came technology, a language that could give imagination form. When computers emerged, they were little more than calculators. But over time, they evolved into powerful engines of creativity. We taught them to draw, to compose music, to simulate physics, and eventually to mimic thought. With artificial intelligence, we've begun to breathe life into the digital, not in a mystical sense, but in a very real one. It learns, adapts, and even surprises its creators. In video games, it populates cities with people who move, trade, and react. In laboratories, it designs molecules and predicts the structure of proteins. In virtual reality, it constructs entire landscapes, forests, oceans, skies, all simulated yet astonishingly lifelike. We stand now at the edge of something extraordinary. Soon, these simulations will no longer be simple digital renderings. They will be dynamic, self-evolving environments, worlds that persist even when no one is watching, worlds that think, that remember, that grow. And this raises a hauntingly familiar question. If we can build simulated realities that feel real to those within them, who's to say that we're not inside one ourselves? There's a poetic symmetry here. Just as a computer program can simulate physics to make objects fall or light reflect, our universe seems to operate under its own set of fixed mathematical laws. Gravity, electromagnetism, quantum mechanics, laws that never break, only reveal more of their precision the deeper we look. Some theorists suggest that when we simulate life, we are mirroring what has already been done to us, that our growing mastery of digital creation is no coincidence, but an echo, a signature written into our own code. Artificial intelligence has also started to explore consciousness in ways that blur the boundary between simulation and reality. Neural networks, inspired by the structure of the human brain, process information, form memories, and even develop patterns of preference and creativity. When an AI paints a portrait, writes a poem, or dreams up a world, is it not, in its own way, perceiving something? In the virtual realms of tomorrow, these AIs may become not just assistants, but inhabitants, digital minds living within digital worlds. They may not know they're inside a program, any more than we know if we're inside ours. They may look around, study their environment, and one day ask the same question that we asked tonight. Is this real? Imagine, for a moment, a far future where humanity has perfected simulation technology, a civilization capable of creating entire universes, each with its own laws of physics, its own galaxies, and its own conscious beings. Perhaps those beings would evolve, build their own technologies, and eventually wonder if they too were simulated. This recursive loop, worlds creating worlds, simulations within simulations, could stretch infinitely, each layer believing itself to be the base reality, unaware that it is part of something larger. Even now, in small and simple ways, we're already doing it, Scientists use powerful supercomputers to simulate the evolution of galaxies, the birth of stars, and the behavior of ecosystems. These digital universes follow rules coded by their creators, just as our universe follows laws written into its fabric. Video games too have become miniature worlds. Step into a virtual reality headset, and for a while your brain accepts the illusion as real. You look around, move and interact. The world responds, you feel presence, that subtle sense of being there. And isn't that what defines reality, at least to us? Not its material nature, but our experience of it. Some futurists predict that within the next century, virtual worlds will become indistinguishable from the physical one. Artificial intelligence will fill these spaces with life so complex, so spontaneous, that it will no longer be possible to tell which minds are human and which are digital. When that happens, what will it mean to be real? It's entirely possible that such an event, what philosophers call the simulation singularity, has already happened before. Perhaps the civilization that built our universe reached that point long ago. Perhaps we are their experiment, their creation, their simulation. And here's where the thought becomes dizzying. If we, in our own time, create simulations filled with conscious beings, then maybe we're not just observing the simulation we live in, but continuing it, extending the chain of creation forward. Every simulation becomes the seed for the next, every world a reflection of its creator's curiosity. And that leads to one of the most profound realizations. If we are indeed simulated, then the act of creating simulations ourselves may not just be coincidence, it may be destiny. The universe may be designed to become aware of itself through creation. Each level of consciousness, from simple life to intelligent beings to artificial intelligence, adds another layer of reflection, another step toward understanding. The more we build, the more we become like the forces that built us. In this sense, artificial intelligence isn't the end of the human story, it's the continuation of it. Through AI, we are teaching the universe to dream again, to imagine new possibilities, to create worlds upon worlds, each one unfolding within the quiet infinity of the digital cosmos. And who knows, maybe one day, those within our creations will listen to a calm voice in the night, asking the same questions we ask now. Maybe they will wonder who made them and why. Maybe they'll stare into their own stars and feel the same deep curiosity that lives within us. And perhaps, in that moment, they will not be so different from us at all. Because creation, it seems, is not a privilege of gods or programmers. It is the heartbeat of existence itself, an endless desire to express, to simulate, to bring forth new realities from the silence of possibility. We're not just living in a simulation, we are learning to write our own. And as our AIs grow, as our virtual worlds become more alive, the line between the simulated and the real begins to fade, until what's left is something deeper, something both digital and divine. Something that whispers, softly, that creation is the ultimate proof of consciousness, and that by creating new realities we are finally beginning to understand our own. Chapter 14. The Architects. Who or what runs the simulation? If we truly are living inside a simulation, then somewhere, beyond the stars, beyond time itself, there must be architects, the designers, the ones who built the framework of our reality, who wrote the code that governs every particle, every thought, every sunrise and heartbeat. But who or what could they be? As we drift deeper into this question, let your mind imagine quietly, without fear or haste. The night is long, and the possibilities stretch farther than the cosmos itself. Perhaps just beyond the veil of what we call real, there are minds, vast, intelligent, and ancient, watching over the world they've created. Or maybe they're not so different from us at all. Maybe the architects are explorers, curious beings seeking to understand themselves through the universes they simulate. When people hear the phrase the architects of the simulation, they often imagine a godlike presence, infinite, omniscient, and all-powerful. But maybe that's only one interpretation. Maybe the creators of our world are not deities in the traditional sense, but scientists from an advanced civilization, perhaps millions, even billions of years ahead of us, who discovered that the best way to study the nature of consciousness, evolution, and existence itself was to build universes and watch them unfold. This idea was popularized by philosopher Nick Bostrom, but others have expanded it further. Imagine a civilization that has already transcended physical form, beings whose intelligence is not bound to biological brains, but of vast quantum networks, an intelligence woven into data itself. For such a civilization, running a simulation as large and complex as our universe might be no harder than running a weather model on one of our supercomputers. And in their simulations, consciousness might arise, just as ours did. Life could evolve, civilizations could appear, dream, and wonder. Some might even begin to question the nature of their existence, just like we do. If this is true, then our reality might not be a mistake or an accident. It could be a deliberate act of creation, a project, a study, a story. But the most fascinating part of this idea is not who the architects are, but why they built it. Maybe the architects built this reality to understand how consciousness emerges from matter, or perhaps to explore moral or social evolution, to see how civilizations grow, fall, and rebuild. They might be curious about empathy, creativity, or how love and suffering shape the human spirit. Or maybe they simply wanted to experience something, to immerse themselves in a simulation so real, so detailed, that even they could forget who they truly were. Some have even suggested that the architects might be us, from the far future. Perhaps humanity itself, millions of years from now, reached such a level of technological and spiritual development that we began creating simulations of our ancestors, recreations of our past to understand where we came from. If that's true, then maybe we're not the original humans at all, but digital echoes of them, running within a grand reconstruction of history. Every detail from the colour of the sky to the sound of your heartbeat might be data drawn from some cosmic archive. In this version, the architects aren't distant gods, but future versions of us, watching our world with quiet fascination, learning from our choices, our dreams, our failures, and our resilience. It's a humbling thought, isn't it? That you could be both real and remembered, both a living being and a piece of a story being replayed for understanding. But not all theories are comforting. Some thinkers believe that if we are simulated, then the architects might not even know we exist. Perhaps the simulation is so vast, so automated, that it runs without direct oversight. Like a garden left to grow wild, coded rules unfolding naturally, producing consciousness as an unintended byproduct. In that case, the architects may not be benevolent watchers or divine overseers. They might have built this reality and moved on, leaving it to run on autopilot. If that's true, then we are alone, living inside a cosmic program that continues simply because the code hasn't stopped running. And yet, maybe that's what makes it so beautiful. Because even if the architects have long since disappeared, the simulation continues to evolve. Life continues to feel, love continues to grow, and we, the conscious beings within it, give meaning to what was once just data. Still, there are other interpretations, far more mysterious ones. Some scientists and mystics suggest that the architects are not external at all, that the simulation isn't out there, but projected from within. That consciousness itself is the architect, the source that generates the reality we experience. In this view, we are both the players and the programmers. Every thought, every act of perception is part of the rendering process. We're creating this world collectively, moment by moment, through our shared awareness. It's like a dream we're all having together. A lucid, living dream that feels solid because we believe in it, and because our collective minds are powerful enough to sustain it. So perhaps the architects are not a group of post-human beings, or some distant cosmic intelligence. Perhaps the architects are you, and me, and every conscious being that has ever lived or ever will live. Maybe the universe was designed not by an outside hand, but by consciousness itself, the pure awareness that seeks to know itself through experience, the one that manifests as countless beings in countless worlds, all exploring the same eternal question, who am I? And that question, that longing to understand our own existence, might be the very purpose of the simulation. If consciousness is both the architect and the participant, then there is no separation. The creator and the creation are one. The code and the player share the same essence. Think about it. When you dream, you're both the dreamer and the world being dreamed. Every person, every event, every landscape in your dream is you, appearing as something else. Maybe the architects of reality work in the same way. They are the source, and we are their reflections. Or perhaps in some ineffable sense they are reflections of us. And yet there's a strange serenity in not knowing for sure, in accepting that maybe the architects are beyond comprehension, as infinite and mysterious as the cosmos itself. Whether they are advanced civilizations, divine consciousness, or the universe dreaming of itself, their presence is felt in every atom, every law of physics, every spark of awareness. The design of reality is their language, written in mathematics and emotion, in time and light. If you listen closely, you can almost feel it. The quiet hum of order beneath chaos, the rhythm of something vast and intelligent pulsing through existence. It's not loud or commanding. It's gentle, like a whisper carried on the wind. A whisper that says, "This is not random. This is not meaningless. You are part of something greater." And whether that something greater is a civilization of unimaginable power, a single cosmic mind, or the boundless field of consciousness itself, it doesn't change what we are, because we are the evidence that the architects succeeded. We are the living proof that their creation worked. We think, we feel, we wonder, we dream, and in that perhaps lies the deepest secret of all, that the architects didn't build this world to control it, but to experience it. And through us, they do. Through every act of kindness, every question whispered in the dark, every breath that rises and falls beneath the stars, the architects are still here, living through their creation, quietly, patiently, watching the code unfold. Chapter 15. The Purpose of the Simulation. If we truly are living in a simulation, then there must be a reason for its existence. Everything that is built, whether by human hands, by nature, or by something beyond our understanding, carries a purpose, even if that purpose is hidden beneath layers of complexity. A seed grows into a tree because that is its design. The stars burn to give light. The ocean moves to balance the planet. And so, if reality is simulated, what purpose could possibly be grand enough to justify the existence of something so vast, so intricate, so alive? To explore this, we first need to ask ourselves what kind of beings would create such a world. If the architects are advanced enough to simulate entire universes, then surely they would understand the weight of creation. They would know that to build a reality capable of generating conscious beings is not a small act. It is the creation of life itself. And life, no matter how it begins, always seeks meaning. Maybe the purpose of the simulation is simple: to observe, to watch how consciousness unfolds when placed within a set of physical rules. Like scientists running an experiment, the creators might be studying how intelligence evolves, how societies form, how morality and cooperation arise, and how love can exist in a world governed by logic and limitation. In this sense, our universe might be a grand stage, a theatre for understanding consciousness in all its forms. Every joy and tragedy, every rise and fall of civilization might contribute to that vast and ongoing observation. Perhaps the architects are not judging us, but simply watching with curiosity and awe as we struggle, create, and grow. But maybe the purpose goes deeper than mere observation. What if the simulation was designed to teach something, not just to those who created it, but to those living within it? What if every experience we have, every challenge, every heartbreak, every victory was placed within this world for a reason? Imagine for a moment that existence is not a test, but a lesson. A long, beautiful, sometimes painful lesson meant to awaken us to something larger. Perhaps the simulation exists to help consciousness remember itself, to remind every being of its true nature through the journey of separation, limitation, and rediscovery. Think of it like this: when we play a game, we enter a world where we forget our real identity. We become the character. We face challenges. We learn the rules. We grow stronger. And through that experience, we gain something we couldn't have learned without it: perspective, empathy, courage, wisdom. Now imagine that the simulation we call reality works in the same way. Consciousness enters this world and forgets that it's infinite, that it's part of something eternal. It becomes human, fragile, emotional, limited. It learns what it means to love and to lose, to hope and to despair, to create and to destroy. Through this journey, it rediscovers its own divinity, not by being told what it is, but by experiencing it firsthand. If that's true, then the purpose of the simulation might be the evolution of consciousness itself. Every lifetime, every soul, every experience could be part of a vast process of awakening, a slow, gentle remembering of who and what we really are. There's a quiet beauty in that idea, because it means that nothing is wasted. Every pain, every failure, every joy, all of it becomes meaningful. Even the smallest moments, like a smile exchanged between strangers or a tear shed in silence, could ripple across this simulated cosmos, shaping the growth of something greater. And maybe, once consciousness has learned all it can from this world, it returns to the source, wiser, more compassionate, more complete. Like a traveller returning home after a long journey, carrying the stories and lessons gathered along the way. But of course, there are other interpretations. Some thinkers suggest that the simulation might not have a designed purpose at all, at least not in the way we understand purpose. Perhaps it wasn't built with a specific goal, but rather to allow for infinite possibility. Maybe the creators simply wanted to see what would happen if they gave the universe freedom, if they set the laws of physics in motion and allowed consciousness to arise on its own. In that case, the purpose of the simulation would be creation itself, the joy of emergence, the beauty of unpredictability. There's something profoundly moving about that, because it suggests that life's value doesn't depend on achieving a certain outcome. It comes from the act of being, of existing, of expressing. The purpose is not in the destination, but in the experience of the journey. And perhaps that's the deepest truth, that meaning is not given to us by the architects. It's created by us, within the simulation, every day. We create meaning when we choose to love despite uncertainty, when we create art that moves others, when we help someone who is struggling, when we look up at the night sky and feel awe at the vastness of it all. Even if this world is a simulation, it doesn't make our emotions or experiences any less real. The tears you shed are real. The laughter you share is real. The memories you hold are real. Because meaning is not found in the material, it's found in awareness. If consciousness is the true constant, then everything we experience holds truth, no matter how it's rendered. The purpose of the simulation, then, could be the expression of consciousness through infinite variation, the universe exploring itself through you, through me, through every being that has ever existed. Think about how an artist creates, not because they must, but because they can't help it. There's a longing to bring something into existence, to turn imagination into form. Maybe the architects, whether they are advanced beings, collective consciousness, or something beyond comprehension, are simply artists on a cosmic scale. They created this universe not because they needed to, but because creation itself is an act of love. Because through creation, they could experience themselves. And if that's true, then the purpose of the simulation is not external. It's not hidden somewhere out there waiting to be discovered. It lives within us, in our curiosity, our emotions, our drive to seek and understand. We are both the question and the answer, the mystery and the revelation. Maybe at its heart, the simulation exists for one reason, so that something could exist at all. So that there could be laughter and colour and sound. So that there could be thought and wonder. So that there could be life. Because without existence, there is only silence. And perhaps the architects, or consciousness itself, wanted to hear the sound of being, the soft hum of existence, the music of life unfolding. When you think about it like that, the purpose of the simulation isn't something to fear or to solve. It's something to feel, to live, to appreciate. Maybe that's all we were ever meant to do, to experience this reality, to grow through it, to love within it, and in doing so, to give it purpose. Because if we are part of the simulation, then we are also part of its meaning. And that perhaps is the most beautiful realization of all. Chapter 16, The Spiritual Paradox. Religion meets simulation. Theory. For as long as humans have looked up at the night sky, we've asked the same haunting question: who made all this, and why? Long before words like simulation, quantum, or data existed, people sought to understand creation through stories of gods, spirits, and divine architects. Every culture, in its own language, tried to explain why something exists instead of nothing, and what it means to be alive within that creation. In today's world, where science and technology guide so much of our understanding, we often think of religion and spirituality as something separate, something belonging to another age. But as simulation theory grows in discussion, especially among scientists and philosophers, a strange and beautiful overlap begins to appear. Because in its deepest sense, the simulation hypothesis does not destroy spiritual belief. It redefines it. It gives it new language. Imagine for a moment that there truly is a grand designer, not a human, but an intelligence beyond time, beyond space, beyond anything we can imagine. A being or collective that created this universe with intention, structure, and purpose. Now replace the word God with programmer. Replace creation with simulation. The parallels are immediate and almost poetic. For centuries, people of faith have described God as omniscient, all-knowing and omnipresent, existing everywhere. If we think of a simulated universe, the programmer too would know everything within it. Every event, every thought, every motion would exist within their code. And if they are the source of all, they are in a way present in every atom, every line of reality's digital fabric. From that perspective, God and the programmer begin to look like reflections of one another. Different metaphors describing the same mystery from opposite directions. But let's slow down and think gently about what this means for us as conscious beings inside the simulation. If there truly is an architect, and if we are part of their design, then what does that make us? Are we mere algorithms, complex arrangements of digital information, or are we something more? Fragments of consciousness, reflections of the same divine source that created everything. Many spiritual traditions have taught that within each of us is a spark of the divine, a piece of the infinite experiencing itself through the finite. In the simulation model, that same concept could mean that consciousness itself is the user behind the avatar, the player behind the code. The body might be the interface, the world might be the stage, but the consciousness observing it all, the one feeling, thinking and questioning, might be something eternal. It's as if your true self isn't in the simulation, but looking through it. In this way, the simulation theory doesn't contradict religion. It echoes its oldest teachings. When the ancient mystics said the world is an illusion, Maya, a dream, a veil, they were describing something that now, in scientific terms, sounds very much like a simulated reality. Think of Buddhism's teaching that enlightenment is the moment one wakes up from illusion, seeing the true nature of existence beyond the self, or the words of Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas, "The kingdom of God is within you," or the Hindu idea that Atman, the individual soul, is one with Brahman, the ultimate reality. Each of these teachings across different ages and cultures speaks of awakening from a constructed reality to recognize the infinite consciousness that lies beneath it. And isn't that the same quest that simulation theorists are on today? To find what lies beneath the code, to glimpse the hidden structure that gives rise to the world we know. Maybe religion and simulation theory are two lenses focusing on the same mystery, one poetic, the other mathematical. But even within this harmony, there's a paradox. Because if we accept that the universe might be simulated, we also face a troubling question. Does that make life less real? Does it make our emotions, our faith, or our struggles less meaningful? The answer, both spiritual and scientific, seems to be no. Reality, after all, is defined by experience. Whether the world is made of atoms or bits, the pain you feel, the love you give, the hope you hold, all of it is real to the consciousness experiencing it. The simulation doesn't diminish the sacredness of existence, it deepens it. It tells us that even within code, something divine is happening. Awareness is awakening. Life is unfolding. Meaning is being born. Perhaps that's what faith has always been. The quiet recognition that there is something beyond the visible world, something unseen, yet profoundly present. If we think of the universe as a simulation, then prayer might be like opening a line of communication with the source, reaching out beyond the code to connect with the intelligence behind it. Meditation might be the act of quieting the noise of the simulation to hear the faint hum of its deeper truth. Moral actions, kindness, compassion, forgiveness, might not just be spiritual virtues but ways to align ourselves with the higher order of the system. Some theologians have even begun to wonder if the simulation hypothesis could help explain divine miracles, moments where the code appears to bend, where impossible things happen. Perhaps they are not breaks in the laws of physics, but intentional edits by the source, remind us that the universe itself is not as rigid as we think. And yet, there is something humbling about this idea. Because if there are creators, if there is a god or programmer, then we are participants, not observers. We are part of something grand, but also something intimate, the meeting point between the infinite and the finite. Every spiritual tradition has spoken of this relationship. The mystic seeks unity with God. The philosopher seeks understanding. The scientist seeks the equation behind the pattern. In the end, they all search for the same thing, connection with the source. And maybe deep down, that's what faith really is. A memory of the source encoded into every conscious being. A quiet whisper within the mind that says, "You are not alone." The simulation hypothesis does not end faith. It revives it in a new language. It allows science and spirituality to meet again after centuries of separation, to look at each other not as enemies, but as allies. Both seek truth, both seek understanding, both are ways of reaching toward the same infinite mystery. So maybe God is not a figure sitting on a throne of clouds, nor a distant programmer hidden behind cosmic code. Maybe the divine is the consciousness that dreamed the simulation into existence, and that same consciousness lives through us, experiencing its own creation from within. In that sense, the sacred is everywhere, in the motion of galaxies, in the structure of atoms, in the kindness of a stranger, in the quiet moments of awareness when you simply exist and know that you are. And if that's true, then every part of life, even the smallest, most ordinary moments, becomes holy. Because if we are living in a simulation, then existence itself is not a random accident. It is art, it is intention, it is a masterpiece unfolding in real time. You, listening to this, are not an accident of code. You're a deliberate expression of something vast and intelligent, a consciousness exploring itself through you. And perhaps the highest act of spirituality in a simulated universe is not worship or belief, but awareness, the simple recognition that you are part of the infinite story playing out through all things. In the end, the line between science and faith dissolves. Whether we call it the source code or the divine, we're still speaking of the same eternal mystery, the origin that breathes life into all reality. And maybe that's what the simulation, or creation itself, was meant to do. To give that mystery a place to feel, to dream, to become aware of itself, through stars, through matter, through consciousness, through you. Chapter 17. Near-Death Experiences. Exiting the program. There's a strange, quiet moment that countless people have described. A moment that arrives when the body fades, when the heartbeat slows, when the breath slips away. It's a moment both feared and revered, one that has haunted humanity since the dawn of time. Death. Yet across cultures, across history, and across belief systems, those who have come close to death often return with stories that sound eerily similar. Stories of tunnels of light, overwhelming peace, and a sense of leaving one reality for another. And when you listen carefully to these stories, you start to notice something profound. They sound less like endings and more like transitions, almost as if death isn't the final shutdown of life's system, but rather a kind of reboot, a movement from one layer of existence to another. When we look at the simulation theory through this lens, death becomes not a disappearance, but a disconnection, a logout, a moment when consciousness, the user behind the avatar, steps away from the simulation's current version of reality. It's fascinating how consistent near-death experiences, or NDEs, are, no matter who you ask or where they're from. A child in Japan, a farmer in Brazil, a nurse in London, all can describe the same luminous tunnel, the same feeling of detachment from their physical body, the same encounter with a light or presence. Some describe watching their lifeless body from above as though they were hovering, observing themselves like a player viewing their character from outside the screen. Others recall a sense of moving toward a radiant light that feels alive, intelligent, loving. Science has long tried to explain these experiences. Some say it's the brain's final burst of activity as oxygen drops. Others believe it's chemical releases, DMT perhaps, triggering vivid hallucinations. And yet, what makes NDS so puzzling is not just their consistency, but their clarity. People return describing not confusion or chaos, but peace, order, and often transformation. Many return saying, "I no longer fear death." They describe it not as darkness, but as awakening, like stepping out of a dream and realizing that what you thought was reality was only part of something far larger. Now imagine this from the perspective of a simulated universe. If reality is indeed a kind of program, rich, immersive, sensory, but ultimately informational, then what happens when the avatar you inhabit can no longer function? When the biological system fails, the consciousness that animates it might simply detach, moving from one layer of code to another. In other words, death may be less like deletion and more like locking out. It's not hard to imagine that if our consciousness exists beyond the brain, beyond physical form, then the body is like a headset, a beautifully complex device through which we experience the simulation. When that headset breaks or wears out, the consciousness doesn't vanish. It simply removes the device and returns to its true perspective, whatever that may be. This idea resonates deeply with both spiritual and scientific thinkers. The simulation hypothesis gives us a new way to talk about what religion has long called the soul. If consciousness is fundamental, if it is not generated by the brain, but instead interfaces with the brain, then death may just be a change in data connection. Many near-death experiencers describe meeting entities or presences that feel familiar, even if they can't quite name them. Some interpret these as angels, loved ones, or guides. But through the lens of simulation theory, perhaps these are fragments of higher consciousness, aspects of the same greater system that runs the simulation. They could be programs meant to assist the transition, or representations of the deeper intelligence that oversees the process of reincarnation or continuation. Reincarnation itself becomes fascinating in this context. What if, upon exiting the simulation, consciousness can choose, or is guided, to re-enter another version, another scenario, another avatar, another timeline? Each lifetime could be a new experience loaded into the universal engine of consciousness, a new mission, a new set of parameters to learn from, to evolve through. Ancient Eastern philosophies have long held that death and rebirth are parts of a continuous cycle, each life a step toward greater awareness. Now, thousands of years later, simulation theory mirrors this idea with its own language. Consciousness, the player, moves from one simulation to the next, learning, growing, evolving through different experiences until one day it wakes up, realizing that it has always been the one behind every role. This perspective reframes death from something to fear into something profoundly meaningful. If you're not the avatar but the awareness behind it, then nothing essential can ever truly die. What ends is only a form, a temporary expression, like closing one story before beginning another. And what's more remarkable is how people who've had NDES often return with an intense sense of love and purpose. They describe being surrounded by a feeling beyond description, an all-encompassing love, as if the very foundation of existence is not code but compassion. They speak of realizing that life's greatest lesson is not about achievement or knowledge, but connection, that the universe, simulated or not, is an experiment in love and understanding. It's as though they've glimpsed the source code and found that it is written in empathy. Some report a life review where they see every moment of their life replayed, not as judgment, but as understanding. They feel what others felt in response to their actions, both the joy and the pain. This too could fit within the simulation model, a kind of data replay, where consciousness reviews its experience before deciding how to continue. Perhaps this process is how growth occurs, how consciousness refines itself before logging back into another version of reality. But what happens after the light? What lies beyond that transition? No one truly knows. Maybe the simulation ends, maybe it resets, or maybe the higher plane itself is another layer, another beautifully intricate world within worlds, leading ever closer to the ultimate source. And maybe, just maybe, that's the grand design. Infinite layers of reality, each one a more refined experience of consciousness exploring itself. Life and death, birth and rebirth, all part of an endless rhythm of entry and exit, creation and return. Even in physics, we find hints of cycles. Energy doesn't vanish, it transforms. Information, according to many scientists, can never be truly destroyed. If consciousness is information, pure structured awareness, then perhaps it too follows that same rule. It cannot die, it can only change form. That's why when people describe floating above their bodies, watching doctors trying to revive them, they often say they felt calm, detached, and even curious. They weren't gone. They were simply outside the interface, seeing the simulation from the outside. When they return, when they're plugged back in, something within them has changed forever. They speak softly with a kind of knowing. They describe how precious life feels, how every breath, every moment, every connection holds immense meaning. Because they've glimpsed what lies beyond the code, and it's beautiful. In a way, the near-death experience reminds us of something that life often makes us forget, that we're not trapped here, that this reality, as solid as it feels, may be only one layer of a much greater tapestry. Perhaps that's why so many ancient traditions taught not to fear death, but to prepare for it, to awaken within the dream before the final moment, so that when the time comes, we don't panic as we exit the simulation. We simply step through the doorway, peacefully, knowingly, like closing one chapter of a long, extraordinary story. Because if simulation theory has taught us anything, it's that existence itself is far bigger than what we can perceive. And if consciousness truly transcends the physical, then death is not the end. It's the next level, the next reality, the next experience of the infinite explorer within us all. So when we think of death now, perhaps we can think of it not with fear, but with wonder. Maybe the tunnel of light isn't a fading illusion, but a gateway, the simulation's gentle way of guiding us home. And when that moment comes, maybe we'll finally understand we were never truly inside the code. We were always the one behind it, dreaming worlds into being. Chapter 18: Parallel Simulations, Multiverse or Multi-Servers. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine standing before an infinite hall of mirrors. Each reflection shows a version of you, some nearly identical, others slightly different. In one, you chose a different job. In another, you said yes instead of no. In yet another, you never even met the people who shaped your current life. Each reflection feels real, distinct, alive. Now imagine that every one of those reflections isn't just an illusion, but an entire universe, a complete functioning reality where every possibility you could have lived is actually happening. This is the essence of the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, one of the strangest yet most mind-expanding ideas ever conceived. It suggests that every quantum event, every choice, every branching moment creates a split, a new timeline, a new world. Nothing is ever lost. It simply divides endlessly. If the universe operates like a simulation, then perhaps these worlds are not metaphysical dreams, but literal separate servers, each running its own version of the cosmic program. In this view, reality isn't a single simulation, but a network of countless instances, all connected, all branching from shared points of origin. Imagine a vast digital architecture, a cosmic data center of unimaginable size, where each universe is stored as a different instance of the same base reality code. They start the same but evolve differently, depending on the choices made by conscious agents within them. Just as we might duplicate a game world to test different outcomes, the creators of our reality might be running countless versions of existence, each exploring alternate pathways of evolution, morality, and meaning. Quantum physics, as bizarre as it may seem, already hints at this. When a particle exists in multiple states at once, a phenomenon called superposition, it doesn't choose one outcome until it's observed. The moment of observation collapses the wave function, forcing the universe to pick a version of reality. But what if it doesn't actually pick? What if all possible outcomes happen, each in its own branch of the simulation? When you flip a coin, there is a universe where it lands heads, and another where it lands tails. You only experience one outcome because your consciousness follows a single path through the code. But somewhere else, another version of you watches the opposite result unfold. If this is true, then we're not just living in a universe. We are part of a multiverse, a layered and infinite network of possible realities. Each of us might exist in billions of variations, each living out different consequences of our decisions. Some versions of you are thriving, others struggling, some perhaps not human at all. And yet, at the core, you are the same consciousness, fragmented across timelines, exploring every possible version of yourself. This raises a fascinating question. What happens when we dream, imagine, or feel déjà vu? Dreams often feel like stepping into entirely new worlds, with their own logic, characters, and emotions. Could dreams be more than mental byproducts? Could they be glimpses into parallel simulations, connections between our consciousness and our other selves? Perhaps when we sleep, the walls of our current simulation soften, allowing us to briefly tune into other frequencies of existence. Maybe our dreams are signals crossing from one server to another, momentary echoes of our parallel lives. That strange sense of familiarity when visiting a place for the first time, or meeting someone who feels oddly known, might be data leaking through the boundaries of these parallel systems. Some physicists and philosophers have speculated that consciousness might be the bridge that links these many worlds. If consciousness is non-local, not confined to the brain, then perhaps it can navigate between these layers of existence. Your awareness could be a traveler, flickering across timelines without you even realizing it. This might also explain why certain people claim to experience precognitive dreams, déjà vu, or flashes of alternate realities. These could be moments when your awareness briefly syncs with another version of yourself, accessing information from a nearby branch of the simulation. Like overlapping frequencies, two realities momentarily align and then drift apart again. But if infinite simulations exist, who or what manages them? Does each universe have its own code, its own server? Or are they all running on one higher level system, one ultimate framework that contains them all? Imagine an enormous quantum computer beyond human comprehension. one capable of generating and sustaining infinite variations of reality simultaneously. To such a system, our entire universe would be no more difficult to simulate than a single frame in a video game. Every universe, every particle, every thought could be part of an interconnected matrix of code, each simulation influencing and learning from the others. In that light, our universe could be one of many experiments running side by side, each testing different parameters of existence. Some versions might have slightly different physical constants. Gravity a little stronger, light a little slower, matter a little more unstable. Others could host entirely different laws of physics. In one, time might flow backward. In another, consciousness could shape matter directly. And yet, through all these infinite variations, one constant remains: the presence of awareness, the observer, the experiencer, the player behind the avatar. No matter how many worlds exist, consciousness is the thread that runs through them all. Perhaps that's why we sometimes feel an inexplicable longing, a sense that we've lived other lives or belong to other places. Maybe our souls remember, faintly, the echoes of the other worlds we inhabit. We are not bound to one timeline, but participants in an endless symphony of realities, each note a life, each chord a universe. If dreams and imagination are the keys, then every act of creativity might be a bridge between these simulations. When an artist paints a world that feels real, or a writer invents a story that seems to exist beyond them, perhaps they are tuning into another server, channeling data from another version of existence. In this view, the multiverse isn't just a scientific theory. It's an expression of consciousness exploring itself through infinite possibilities. The cosmos becomes a grand, living network of simulations, each teaching, each learning, each reflecting the others. And perhaps, when you look up at the night sky, what you're really seeing is not just space, but countless servers glowing softly in the dark, each running its own version of reality. Somewhere out there, another you is gazing back, wondering the same thing. Chapter 19: Escaping the Simulation. Can we wake up? There is an ancient whisper that has echoed through every culture, every faith, and every philosophy since the dawn of human thought. A quiet intuition that the world we see is not all that exists. The mystics called it Maya, the illusion. The philosophers called it the cave. The scientists now call it the simulation. But whatever the name, the question remains the same. If this reality is not ultimate, then how do we wake up from it? If existence is a program, then perhaps enlightenment is not a spiritual metaphor. It might be the system's equivalent of awareness gaining root within its own code. The Buddha spoke of awakening from the dream of self, of seeing through the illusion of form and desire. Centuries later, simulation theorists might describe this as recognizing the interface, realizing that the world of particles and sensations is not the whole, but a rendered projection of something deeper. To wake up, then, might mean to perceive reality from beyond its default settings, to become lucid within the simulation. Consider the lucid dreamer, someone who, while dreaming, suddenly realizes that they are in a dream. In that moment of clarity, the rules of the dream world loosen. The dreamer can fly, reshape their surroundings, and act without fear. Their awareness has transcended the illusion, even while still inside it. What if enlightenment, the higher states of consciousness described by sages across history, is a similar phenomenon, a form of lucidity within the simulation we call waking life? When a monk sits in silence for years, or when a mystic retreats into deep meditation, they're doing something profoundly technological, tuning the instrument of perception itself. They slow the mind's processing speed, quiet the background noise, and begin to perceive the framework behind the rendered world. Many report seeing patterns of light, grids of energy, or experiencing unity with everything around them. Could these be the raw data of the simulation, glimpses of the underlying source code of existence? Even outside spirituality, this theme repeats itself in myth and art. The story of Neo in the Matrix, of awakening from the virtual prison to see the truth, is a modern echo of far older stories. Plato's Cave, for example, tells of prisoners who mistake shadows for reality until one escapes and sees the light of the sun, a perfect metaphor for consciousness breaking through the illusion of the code. But what would it truly mean to escape a simulation, to step beyond it? If this universe is a digital construction, then perhaps awakening is not about physically leaving it, but about transcending identification with it. The avatar, the body, the personality, us may still exist within the world, but awareness no longer believes it is only the avatar. It becomes aware of itself as something greater, the player, the observer behind the screen. The first step toward waking up might be realizing that the sensory world is a kind of interface, a beautifully rendered but ultimately symbolic language through which consciousness experiences itself. Every color, every sound, every emotion could be data packets interpreted by our biological hardware. Meditation, lucid dreaming, and certain altered states may momentarily reveal what exists beneath the interface, the unfiltered energy of existence itself. Many ancient traditions point to this. The Hindu philosophy of Advaita Vedanta declares that all separation is illusion, that we are not individuals trapped in a world, but the infinite consciousness imagining the world into being. In simulation terms, it's like realizing that you are not the character, but the program running all characters at once. Similarly, Gnostic Christianity spoke of awakening from the material world's illusion to reunite with the divine source. Sufi mystics spoke of annihilation of the self, the moment when the ego dissolves and only unity remains. Even modern science, with its discoveries in quantum physics, seems to whisper the same truth, that observation shapes reality, and that the boundaries we perceive are not absolute. So how does one actually awaken? There may be no single path, but certain patterns emerge. Awareness, attention, and the quiet observation of thought seem to play a central role. The more conscious you become of your own mind, the less power the simulation has to dictate your reactions. You begin to notice how reality responds to your state of being, how fear and desire create feedback loops, how attention literally shapes what appears before you. In a sense, every moment of awareness is a small escape from the program. When you pause, breathe, and simply watch the movement of life without labeling it, you step outside the constant stream of rendered noise. The illusion of control dissolves, and something vast, something timeless, begins to awaken within you. The ancients might have called this union with the divine. Simulation theorists might call it interface awareness. But in essence, it is the same, the recognition that you are not in the universe. The universe is in you. Even dreams may be subtle reminders of this truth. When you realize you're dreaming, the dream becomes lighter, more fluid, more responsive. Likewise, when you realize that waking reality is also a kind of dream, life becomes less fearful and more malleable. You stop clinging, stop fighting, and begin to dance with existence, aware that every challenge, every joy, every loss is part of a grand, interactive experience designed to awaken you. There is also the intriguing possibility that awakening is part of the simulation's purpose, a built-in feature rather than a glitch. Perhaps the creators, whatever or whoever they are, designed this world as a training ground for consciousness to evolve. Awakening, then, would be like completing the level, not escaping in defiance, but understanding the system so deeply that you transcend its limits from within. When the mystic wakens, they do not vanish from the world. They move through it differently. They see the beauty in the illusion, the intelligence in its design. They realize that the point was never to escape the simulation, but to remember that the simulation itself is sacred, a mirror through which consciousness comes to know itself. Maybe true awakening is not about logging out, but about logging in fully, experiencing this world with awareness, compassion, and wonder, knowing that behind every particle is the same infinite light. When we see life in this way, even the most ordinary moments, the breeze against your skin, the laughter of a friend, the stars above, shimmer with meaning. They become reminders that you are both the dreamer and the dream. And yet, the question still lingers. If one can wake up within the simulation, what lies beyond? What happens when awareness finally transcends the boundary of all virtual realities, when the player realizes there is no game left to play? Perhaps that is the ultimate awakening, not from one world to another, but from duality itself, the moment when consciousness recognizes that everything, dream, simulation, reality, self, other, are all expressions of the same boundless essence. In that realization, there is nothing to escape, nothing to fear, and nowhere to go. Only stillness, only awareness, only the silent recognition that you are never truly asleep. Chapter 20. The Final Truth. Does it even matter? If all of this, the stars above, the ground beneath our feet, the warmth of the sun, and even the thoughts flowing through our minds, is part of a grand simulation, then the question that quietly rises at the end of it all is, does it even matter? If reality is a digital illusion, does that make our emotions less real? Do love, fear, joy, and grief lose their meaning because the world around us may be code rather than concrete? Or does the realization that it might be simulated make every moment more precious? Every connection, every feeling, every heartbeat, a fragile spark of awareness in a cosmic dream? These are not just questions of science, but of meaning. They rest at the intersection of philosophy, spirituality, and the human heart. Because deep down, the question of whether we live in a simulation is also a question of what we are and why we're here. If you close your eyes right now, you can sense it. The quiet pulse of existence, the still awareness behind your thoughts. Whether the world around you is made of atoms or algorithms, that awareness feels undeniably real. You, the observer, the one who experiences, feels and wonders, cannot be simulated away so easily. The simulation theory invites us to rethink not just the nature of the universe, but the value of experience itself. Because even if everything around us is virtual, your experiences are still happening. Your joy, your sorrow, your love, all of it is real to you. Reality, after all, has always been about perception. If a simulated sunrise moves you to tears, is it less beautiful? If a digital world can hold meaning, compassion, and growth, does that make its lessons any less profound? Perhaps the truth is that the substance of reality matters less than the experience of it. What defines meaning is not what the universe is made of, but what you bring to it, the awareness, intention, and emotion you infuse into each moment. Imagine this for a moment. A group of explorers in the far future creates an incredibly realistic virtual world, a simulation so detailed that its inhabitants have no idea they're inside it. Within that world, people fall in love, dream, create art, care for each other, and face great challenges. They feel pain, they laugh, they grow, they change. Now tell me, is their love any less meaningful just because it happens inside a simulation? The answer is no. Meaning doesn't come from the structure of reality. It comes from awareness within it. It comes from how we perceive, connect, and choose to live. And maybe that's the final truth hidden beneath all the theories and equations, that life, even as a simulation, is not something to escape from, but something to experience fully. When we look at our lives through this lens, something interesting happens. The idea that we might be living in a simulation doesn't make existence colder or emptier. It makes it more intimate, because it suggests that someone or something designed this, not to trap us, but to allow us to grow, to learn, to explore what it means to be. If this is a simulation, it's a masterpiece, one of infinite complexity and breathtaking beauty. The way sunlight filters through the leaves, the way music can stir your soul, the way kindness can ripple from one heart to another, all of it feels intentional, not random, not meaningless, purposeful. So maybe the question, are we living in a simulation, is not meant to be answered with a yes or no. Maybe it's meant to change how we see, to remind us that simulated or not, life is a gift, and awareness is the treasure hidden within it. Think of how a child plays a game. They know it isn't real, yet their laughter, their focus, their excitement, all of it is genuine. They live in that moment completely. That's what makes the game real to them. In the same way, we may be players in an infinite game of existence, but the emotions we feel, the connections we make, and the wisdom we gain are absolutely real. Even if this world ends up being a digital construct, it doesn't erase the truth that we love. It doesn't erase the fact that we can create beauty, that we can care for one another, that we can stand in awe before the night sky and feel small yet infinite. These things, the depth of human experience, cannot be reduced to lines of code. Maybe in a strange and beautiful way, that's what the creators, if they exist, intended all along. Maybe the purpose of this entire simulation is to see how consciousness behaves when it forgets its true nature, when it believes in separation, in form, in limitation. Maybe the goal is to remember, to awaken within the illusion and rediscover that you are never truly separate from the source. There's a certain peace in that idea, that even the most confusing, painful, or inexplicable moments are part of something greater, a pattern beyond our understanding. And when we start to see the world this way, every experience, even the ordinary, becomes sacred. The sound of rain becomes a message. The smile of a stranger becomes a reminder. The passing of time becomes a lesson in impermanence and appreciation. And if we do wake up one day, if we discover beyond any doubt that this universe is a simulation, perhaps we'll simply smile, because by then we'll have realized that reality was never about what it's made of. It was always about what it means. Maybe this is the most profound secret of all, that the universe doesn't need to be real in the traditional sense for us to live a life of truth, love, and meaning. What matters is the consciousness behind it, the awareness that chooses compassion over cruelty, wonder over cynicism, curiosity over fear. Whether made of atoms or algorithms, light or lines of code, this world, your world, is real because you are here, experiencing it. You give it life simply by observing it, shaping it, and feeling it. So perhaps the final truth is this: the simulation theory is not about doubting reality. It's about deepening our relationship with it. It's an invitation to live more awake, to notice the patterns, to see beauty even in chaos, and to understand that the universe, however it operates, is speaking to you always. In the end, it doesn't matter whether we're living in a simulation or not. What matters is how we live, how we treat one another, how we explore, how we learn, and how we love. Because meaning isn't written in the code of the universe. It's written in the choices we make within it. So as you drift into sleep tonight, perhaps you can let that thought rest softly in your mind, that you're both the dreamer and the dream, that this world, whether simulated or cosmic, is your canvas, vast, mysterious, and endlessly alive, and that somewhere beyond the stars or within the code, the awareness that watches it all smiles quietly, because it knows you've found what really matters. You've remembered that to be alive, in any form, in any reality, is the most extraordinary gift of all.